Beneath the crushing depths of the North Atlantic, where sunlight has never touched the ocean floor and pressure would instantly destroy unprotected human flesh, stands a monument to humanity's greatest ambitions and most profound failures. In the drowned corridors of Rapture, where Art Deco splendor crumbles beneath the weight of ideological collapse, giants walk in eternal servitude, their heavy footsteps echoing through flooded galleries as they fulfill a purpose that has outlasted the civilization that created them. Tonight, we descend into the abyss to witness the complete transformation of human beings into something both more and less than what they once were. Guardians whose devotion transcends death itself. To understand how ordinary men became the gentle giants who would patrol Rapture's corridors for decades after the city's fall, we must first descend to the very foundations of Andrew Ryan's underwater paradise, where the crushing weight of the Atlantic Ocean demanded innovations that would ultimately reshape the nature of human existence itself. The story of the Big Daddies begins not with genetic experimentation or psychological conditioning, but with the fundamental challenge that faced every architect and engineer who dared to build a city beneath 2 miles of seawater: the constant, relentless battle against forces that sought to reclaim the space that humanity had carved from the ocean floor. The construction of Rapture had required engineering solutions that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in the middle decades of the 20th century, combining cutting-edge materials science with revolutionary architectural concepts that transformed the sea floor into a foundation capable of supporting a metropolis of unprecedented ambition and scope. The massive support columns that anchored the city to the bedrock below were marvels of engineering that incorporated advanced metallurgy and structural design principles, while the interconnected network of tunnels and chambers that formed the city's foundation represented a triumph of human determination over the hostile environment of the deep ocean. But even the most sophisticated engineering could not eliminate the fundamental truth that Rapture existed in an environment where the slightest structural failure could result in catastrophic flooding that would destroy entire sections of Dame Bao, the city, and kill thousands of residents in a matter of minutes. The external hull that protected the city's inhabitants from the crushing pressure of the deep ocean required constant maintenance and vigilant monitoring, while the complex systems of pumps, seals, and pressure valves that regulated the city's internal environment demanded the attention of skilled technicians who could work effectively in conditions that would challenge even the most experienced industrial workers. The men who volunteered for this dangerous work were drawn from the ranks of experienced deep-sea divers, construction workers, and industrial technicians who had been attracted to Rapture by the promise of unprecedented economic opportunities and the chance to participate in humanity's most ambitious engineering project. These workers understood that their jobs would involve risks that went far beyond conventional industrial hazards, requiring them to perform complex technical tasks while wearing bulky atmospheric diving suits that limited their mobility and made even simple repairs into exhausting ordeals that could take hours to complete. The diving suits that were initially provided for this external maintenance work were based on conventional designs that had been developed for commercial diving operations in much shallower waters, modified with additional reinforcement and enhanced life support systems to enable operation at the extreme depths where Rapture had been constructed. These early suits were massive, unwieldy devices that required extensive training to operate effectively and imposed severe physical demands on their wearers, who had to contend not only with the technical challenges of their work, but also with the psychological stress of operating in an environment where equipment failure could result in instant death. The atmospheric pressure inside these suits was maintained at sea-level conditions to prevent decompression sickness and nitrogen narcosis. But this created additional complications when workers needed to transition between the pressurized environment of the suits and the standard atmospheric conditions maintained within Rapture's habitable spaces. The decompression procedures required careful timing and monitoring, while the physical stress of wearing the heavy suits for extended periods took a toll on even the strongest and most experienced workers. The psychological challenges of this work were as significant as the physical demands, as workers had to overcome the natural human fear of the deep ocean while performing complex technical tasks in conditions of limited visibility and constant danger. The external surfaces of Rapture were illuminated by powerful floodlights that created pools of brilliance in the surrounding darkness. But beyond these circles of artificial daylight lay an abyss that seemed to stretch into infinity, populated by deep-sea creatures that had never been catalogued by surface-dwelling scientists, and geological formations that defied conventional understanding. The first serious accidents occurred within months of Rapture's completion, when equipment failures and human error combined to create situations that the city's original safety protocols had not adequately anticipated. Workers who suffered suit breaches or life support failures faced death by drowning or crushing pressure, while those who became lost or disoriented in the maze of external structures sometimes vanished entirely, their fate unknown, until their bodies were discovered weeks or months later by subsequent maintenance crews. These early casualties created a crisis of confidence among the workforce that threatened to undermine the entire external maintenance program, as experienced divers began to refuse assignments that they considered unnecessarily dangerous, and new recruits became increasingly difficult to find, despite the generous compensation packages that Ryan Industries offered to attract qualified candidates. The technical challenges of the work were compounded by the growing realization that conventional diving technology was inadequate for the unique demands of maintaining a city at such extreme depths. The economic implications of these workforce problems were severe, as delays in routine maintenance began to create more serious structural issues that required increasingly complex and expensive repairs. The cost of training, replacement workers, and upgrading safety equipment was consuming resources that had been allocated for other aspects of Rapture's development, while the psychological impact of the accidents was beginning to affect the morale of the entire population, who could not help but be aware that their city's survival depended on the willingness of a relatively small number of specialists to risk their lives in the hostile environment outside their protective walls. Andrew Ryan's response to these challenges reflected both his pragmatic understanding of engineering realities and his philosophical commitment to the principle that human ingenuity could overcome any obstacle when properly motivated and adequately resourced. Rather than accepting the limitations imposed by conventional diving technology, he authorized the development of enhanced atmospheric suits that would provide greater protection and improved mobility for external workers, while simultaneously investigating more radical solutions that might eliminate the need for human workers to operate in such dangerous conditions. The enhanced diving suits that emerged from this development program incorporated advanced materials that had been developed specifically for Rapture's unique requirements, including reinforced metal alloys that could withstand the extreme pressure of the deep ocean, while providing greater flexibility and ease of movement than conventional designs. The life support systems were redesigned to provide longer operating times and more reliable emergency backup capabilities, while improved communication equipment enabled better coordination between external workers and their surface support teams. But even these technological improvements could not eliminate the fundamental risks associated with external maintenance work, and the accident rate remained unacceptably high, despite the enhanced safety measures and improved equipment. The psychological toll on the workforce continued to mount as experienced workers witnessed the deaths or serious injuries of their colleagues, while the families of those who worked in external maintenance lived with constant anxiety about the dangers their loved ones faced every time they left the safety of Rapture's pressurized environment. The realization that conventional approaches to external maintenance were fundamentally inadequate led to the first serious discussions about more radical solutions that would reduce or eliminate the risks faced by human workers. These early conversations focused primarily on the development of automated systems and remote-controlled machinery that could perform routine maintenance tasks without requiring human operators to leave the safety of Rapture's internal environment. But the technical challenges of creating such systems proved to be enormous, and the costs associated with their development were prohibitive. It was during this period of crisis and experimentation that the first proposals were made for enhancing human workers themselves, rather than merely improving their equipment, suggesting that advances in genetic modification and surgical techniques might make it possible to create workers who were physically adapted to the extreme environment of the deep ocean. These early proposals were tentative and speculative, reflecting more hope than concrete scientific understanding, but they planted the intellectual seeds that would eventually grow into the comprehensive human enhancement programs that would transform ordinary men into the big daddies. The philosophical implications of such proposals were profound and troubling, raising fundamental questions about the nature of human identity and the extent to which individuals could be modified while still retaining their essential humanity. The scientists and engineers who discussed these possibilities were acutely aware that they were contemplating changes that would be irreversible and potentially dehumanizing, transforming volunteers into something that might be more machine than man, while simultaneously solving the practical problems that threatened Rapture's long-term survival. The ethical debates that surrounded these early discussions were complicated by the urgent practical needs that drove them, as the continued failure to solve the external maintenance crisis threatened not just the economic viability of individual projects, but the structural integrity of the entire city. The men who died in diving accidents were not abstract casualties, but friends and colleagues whose losses were felt throughout the community, while the families who depended on external maintenance work for their livelihood faced an uncertain future in a city where such work was becoming increasingly dangerous and economically unsustainable. The gradual recognition that human enhancement might be necessary rather than merely desirable represented a turning point in Rapture's development, marking the moment when the city's leadership began to seriously consider solutions that would have been unthinkable during the initial planning and construction phases. The transformation from a city that used advanced technology to support human workers to one that modified human workers to suit technological requirements would prove to be irreversible, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately reshape not just the external maintenance program, but the entire social and moral fabric of Rapture's civilization. The men who would eventually become the first Big Daddies could not have imagined the fate that awaited them as they continued their dangerous work in the depths surrounding Rapture, unaware that their courage and sacrifice were already being studied by scientists who were developing technologies that would transform their successors into something that transcended the limitations of ordinary human biology. The foundation that they were maintaining with such dedication and at such personal cost would eventually support not just the physical structure of Andrew Ryan's underwater paradise, but also the moral compromises and scientific ambitions that would give birth to some of the most remarkable and disturbing achievements in the history of human genetic modification. In the deepest trenches surrounding Rapture's foundation, where volcanic vents created oases of warmth in the crushing cold of the abyssal depths, a discovery was made that would transform not only the maintenance of Andrew Ryan's underwater city, but the very nature of human biology itself. The sea slugs that thrived in these thermal environments possessed a unique property that had gone unnoticed by surface marine biologists, harboring within their primitive nervous systems a substance that would prove to be the most powerful mutagenic agent ever encountered by human science. The scientist who first recognized the extraordinary potential of these unremarkable creatures was Dr. Brigitte Tenenbaum, a German geneticist whose wartime research into human experimentation had made her both brilliantly insightful and morally compromised, bringing to Rapture a combination of scientific genius and ethical flexibility that would prove essential for the revolutionary work that lay ahead. Her background in genetic manipulation and human biology made her uniquely qualified to understand the implications of what she observed when examining tissue samples from the deep-sea specimens that maintenance crews occasionally brought back from their external operations. The substance that Tenenbaum isolated from these creatures was unlike anything that had been previously catalogued by marine biologists or genetic researchers, displaying properties that seemed to violate fundamental principles of cellular biology while demonstrating effects that bordered on the miraculous. She designated this compound ADAM, an acronym that reflected both its role in cellular reconstruction and its biblical significance as the raw material from which new forms of life could be created through scientific intervention rather than divine will. ADAM appeared to function as a universal genetic modifier, capable of rewriting the fundamental instructions that governed cellular development and tissue formation in ways that could produce dramatic changes in human physiology within remarkably short periods of time. Unlike conventional mutagenic substances that typically caused random and often harmful alterations to genetic structure, ADAM seemed to possess an inherent intelligence that enabled it to make purposeful modifications that enhanced rather than degraded the organisms that were exposed to its effects. The initial experiments that Tenenbaum conducted with ADAM samples revealed capabilities that exceeded even her most optimistic expectations, as the compound demonstrated the ability to regenerate damaged tissue, enhance physical strength and endurance, and even grant entirely new capabilities that had no natural equivalent in human biology. Test subjects who received carefully controlled doses of ADAM showed remarkable improvements in healing rates, resistance to disease, and physical performance, while higher doses produced more dramatic transformations that seemed to transcend the normal limitations of human physiology. But the true revolutionary potential of ADAM became apparent only when Tenenbaum began to understand the mechanism by which the compound achieved its effects, recognizing that it functioned not merely as a passive mutagen, but as an active biological system that could be programmed to produce specific alterations in genetic expression and cellular development. This programmability meant that ADAM could potentially be used to create deliberate and predictable modifications to human biology, transforming genetic engineering from an unpredictable art into a precise science. The implications of this discovery extended far beyond the immediate applications that Tenenbaum envisioned for medical treatment and human enhancement, suggesting possibilities for biological modification that could revolutionize every aspect of human existence, from physical capabilities to intellectual capacity to emotional responses. The compound offered the prospect of eliminating genetic diseases, enhancing human intelligence, increasing physical strength and endurance, and even granting entirely new sensory and cognitive capabilities that could expand the range of human experience in unprecedented ways. The economic potential of ADAM was equally staggering, as the compound's unique properties made it potentially more valuable than any natural resource that had ever been discovered, while its scarcity and difficulty of extraction created opportunities for enormous profits for those who could control its production and distribution. Andrew Ryan recognized immediately that ADAM represented not just a scientific breakthrough, but an economic foundation that could sustain Rapture's independence from the surface world while providing the resources necessary to fund continued expansion and development of his underwater civilization. The challenge of extracting and refining ADAM from its natural sources proved to be extraordinarily complex, as the compound was present in only minute quantities within the sea slug specimens and was highly unstable when removed from its original biological context. The extraction process required sophisticated laboratory equipment and techniques that pushed the boundaries of existing biochemical knowledge, while the purification and stabilization procedures demanded levels of precision that were difficult to achieve, even with the most advanced scientific instruments available in Rapture's research facilities. Dr. Yi Su-chong, a brilliant but ruthlessly ambitious scientist, whose expertise in genetic manipulation complemented Tenenbaum's theoretical knowledge, became deeply involved in the ADAM research program as the practical challenges of working with the compound became apparent. Su-chong's background in applied genetics and his willingness to pursue research paths that more ethically constrained scientists might avoid made him an ideal collaborator for projects that required both technical innovation and moral flexibility. The partnership between Tenenbaum and Su-chong represented a formidable combination of theoretical understanding and practical application, as their complementary skills enabled them to overcome technical obstacles that might have proven insurmountable for researchers working independently. Tenenbaum's deep understanding of genetic theory provided the conceptual framework for their experiments, while Su-chong's expertise in laboratory techniques and experimental design enabled them to translate theoretical possibilities into practical realities. The early human trials of ADAM revealed both the extraordinary potential and the significant dangers associated with the compound, as test subjects experienced dramatic improvements in physical and mental capabilities, while also displaying unpredictable side effects that ranged from minor cosmetic alterations to profound psychological changes that transformed their basic personality and behavioral patterns. The enhancement effects were undeniable and impressive, but they came at costs that were not immediately apparent, and that would only become fully understood after years of continued research and observation. The first commercial applications of ADAM focused on medical treatments for conditions that had previously been considered incurable, as the compound's regenerative properties offered hope for patients suffering from degenerative diseases, traumatic injuries, and genetic disorders that conventional medicine could not address. The success of these early therapeutic applications created enormous demand for ADAM-based treatments throughout Rapture's population, while also generating the financial resources necessary to fund expanded research into more ambitious applications of the compound. The transformation of ADAM from an experimental laboratory curiosity into a commercial product required the development of sophisticated production and distribution systems that could ensure consistent quality and availability while maintaining the secrecy necessary to protect Rapture's technological advantages from surface world competitors. The infrastructure that emerged to support the ADAM industry became one of the largest and most important economic sectors in Rapture's economy, employing thousands of workers and generating revenues that supported continued expansion of the city's research capabilities. The social impact of widespread ADAM use throughout Rapture's population was profound and complex, creating new forms of inequality based on access to genetic enhancement, while also generating unprecedented opportunities for human advancement and achievement. Citizens who could afford regular ADAM treatments gained significant advantages in physical and intellectual capabilities, while those who lacked the financial resources to participate in the enhancement programs found themselves increasingly disadvantaged in a society where genetic modification was becoming the norm rather than the exception. The addictive properties of ADAM became apparent only after widespread commercial distribution had already created a substantial population of regular users, as the compound's effects on brain chemistry produced dependency patterns that were difficult to break and that drove continued consumption. Even when users experienced negative side effects from prolonged exposure, the addiction potential of ADAM created both social problems and economic opportunities, as the demand for continued treatment became increasingly inelastic and the market for enhancement services expanded beyond therapeutic applications into recreational and cosmetic uses. The emergence of what came to be known as splicing among Rapture's population represented the dark side of the ADAM revolution, as prolonged exposure to high doses of the compound produced increasingly severe mutations that transformed users into barely recognizable creatures whose enhanced capabilities were offset by profound physical and psychological deterioration. These early splicers served as a warning about the dangers of uncontrolled ADAM use, but their condition was initially dismissed as the result of improper dosage or contaminated supplies, rather than an inherent risk associated with the compound itself. The connection between ADAM research and the external maintenance problems that plagued Rapture's infrastructure became apparent when scientists began to explore the possibility of using genetic modification to create workers who were better adapted to the extreme conditions of the deep ocean environment. The compound's ability to produce specific and predictable alterations in human physiology suggested that it might be possible to create enhanced workers who could perform external maintenance tasks without requiring the bulky, atmospheric suits and complex life support systems that made conventional diving operations so dangerous and expensive. The preliminary experiments in creating genetically enhanced maintenance workers focused on relatively modest modifications that would improve strength, endurance, and resistance to pressure-related injuries, without dramatically altering the subject's fundamental humanity or psychological makeup. These early trials produced encouraging results, as volunteers who received carefully designed ADAM treatments demonstrated significant improvements in their ability to perform physical tasks while wearing atmospheric diving suits, and showed increased resistance to the psychological stresses associated with deep ocean work. But the true potential of ADAM for solving Rapture's maintenance challenges became apparent only when researchers began to explore more radical approaches that would eliminate the need for atmospheric suits entirely by modifying workers to survive in the external ocean environment without artificial life support. These experiments represented a fundamental departure from the therapeutic and enhancement applications that had previously defined ADAM research, moving into territory that raised profound questions about the boundaries between human and machine, between medical treatment and fundamental alteration of human nature. The ethical debates that surrounded these advanced applications of ADAM reflected broader tensions within Rapture's scientific community, between those who viewed genetic modification as a tool for human improvement and those who worried about the long-term consequences of tampering with fundamental aspects of human biology. The urgency of the practical problems facing Rapture's infrastructure, combined with the apparent willingness of volunteers to accept significant risks in exchange for substantial financial compensation, gradually shifted the balance of these debates toward more aggressive and experimental approaches. The realization that ADAM could potentially be used to create permanently modified workers who would be better adapted to external maintenance duties than any conventional diving equipment could provide represented a turning point in Rapture's approach to human enhancement, marking the moment when genetic modification transitioned from being a medical and consumer technology to becoming an industrial and military resource. This transition would have profound implications not only for the individuals who participated in these programs, but for the entire social and economic structure of Andrew Ryan's underwater civilization. The technical challenges of creating genetically modified workers who could survive in the external ocean environment were enormous and complex, requiring advances in multiple areas of biological science, while also demanding solutions to engineering problems that had never been seriously attempted by any previous research program. The integration of biological modifications with mechanical systems, the development of life support technologies that could function as permanent implants, and the creation of communication systems that could operate in the deep ocean environment, all required innovations that pushed the boundaries of existing scientific knowledge. The psychological challenges of transforming volunteers into permanently modified workers were equally daunting, as the procedures involved not only physical alterations, but also mental conditioning that would enable the subjects to function effectively in roles that differed fundamentally from any normal human occupation. The isolation, the physical demands, and the permanent nature of the modifications all required psychological preparation that went far beyond conventional job training, involving techniques that bordered on the experimental, and that carried risks that were not fully understood by the scientists who developed them. As the ADAM research program expanded to encompass these new applications, the compound's role in Rapture's society evolved from being primarily a medical and enhancement technology to becoming the foundation for an entirely new approach to human-machine integration that would eventually give birth to the Big Daddy program. The sea slugs that had initially seemed like mere scientific curiosities became the biological foundation for a transformation of human nature that would produce some of the most remarkable and disturbing achievements in the history of genetic engineering, setting the stage for developments that would reshape not only individual human beings but the entire future of Rapture's civilization. The transition from theoretical possibility to practical reality in the creation of genetically enhanced maintenance workers required a careful selection process that would identify individuals who possessed not only the physical capabilities necessary for extreme modification, but also the psychological resilience required to survive procedures that would fundamentally alter their humanity. The criteria that emerged from the early planning stages reflected both scientific considerations about genetic compatibility and practical concerns about finding volunteers who would willingly undergo transformations that were acknowledged to be irreversible and potentially dangerous. The initial recruitment efforts focused on members of Rapture's existing maintenance workforce who had already demonstrated their willingness to accept significant risks in exchange for financial compensation and who possessed the technical skills necessary to perform complex repairs in the challenging environment of the deep ocean. These experienced workers understood better than anyone else the limitations and dangers of conventional diving equipment, making them natural candidates for experimental procedures that promised to eliminate those limitations while simultaneously solving their economic and safety concerns. The psychological profiles that were developed for potential candidates emphasized stability, resilience, and adaptability, recognizing that the transformation process would require individuals who could cope with radical changes to their physical condition while maintaining their effectiveness as skilled technical workers. The screening process included extensive interviews, psychological evaluations, and medical examinations designed to identify candidates who possessed the mental and physical characteristics necessary for success in the experimental program. The financial incentives that were offered to potential volunteers were substantial enough to attract interest from workers who might otherwise have been reluctant to participate in such experimental procedures, while the promises of enhanced capabilities and improved safety created additional motivation for those who had already experienced the dangers and limitations of conventional diving work. The combination of immediate financial benefits and long-term improvements in working conditions proved to be an effective recruitment strategy that generated a steady stream of qualified volunteers. But the selection process also required careful consideration of ethical factors that went beyond simple questions of informed consent, as the irreversible nature of the proposed modifications meant that volunteers would be making decisions with consequences that could not be undone if the procedures proved unsuccessful or produced unexpected side effects. The review committees that evaluated potential candidates struggled with questions about the extent to which individuals could truly give informed consent to procedures whose long-term effects were not fully understood even by the scientists who had developed them. The preliminary medical evaluations that were conducted on potential candidates revealed significant variations in genetic compatibility with ADAM-based modifications, as some individuals showed clear evidence of positive responses to small test doses, while others displayed adverse reactions that suggested they would not be suitable for more extensive genetic alterations. These compatibility tests became an essential part of the screening process, eliminating candidates who were likely to experience serious complications while identifying those whose genetic makeup made them ideal subjects for the experimental procedures. The first volunteer to be selected for the full transformation process was a deep-sea maintenance specialist named Marcus Holloway, whose combination of technical expertise, psychological stability, and genetic compatibility made him an ideal candidate for the experimental procedures that would serve as a proof of concept for the entire program. Holloway's background included more than 15 years of experience in underwater construction and repair work, during which he had survived several serious accidents and demonstrated remarkable resilience in dealing with the physical and psychological challenges of deep ocean operations. The transformation procedures that were developed for Holloway and subsequent candidates represented a radical departure from conventional medical practice, combining surgical techniques that had never been attempted with genetic modifications that pushed the boundaries of existing scientific knowledge. The process began with extensive preparation that included psychological conditioning designed to help subjects cope with the dramatic changes they would experience, while also providing them with the mental frameworks necessary to function effectively in their new roles as enhanced workers. The surgical phase of the transformation involved the removal of the subject's natural voice box and its replacement with a mechanical communication system that would function effectively in the deep ocean environment, while also serving as a conduit for the control systems that would integrate their biological and mechanical components. This procedure, which was among the most psychologically challenging aspects of the entire transformation process, represented the first irreversible step in the conversion from human worker to enhanced maintenance specialist. The removal of vocal capabilities served multiple purposes beyond simple communication in the underwater environment, as it also eliminated the possibility that transformed workers might be able to communicate distress or dissatisfaction to other members of Rapture's population, who might not understand the voluntary nature of their participation in being the program. The psychological impact of losing the ability to speak was profound and lasting, creating a form of isolation that separated the transformed workers from normal human social interaction, while also reinforcing their dependence on the scientists and technicians who controlled their new communication systems. The skin grafting procedures that followed the voice box modification involved the integration of synthetic materials with natural tissue to create a protective layer that could interface directly with the atmospheric diving suits that would become permanent parts of the subjects' bodies. These grafts required extensive preparation of the underlying tissue and careful matching of synthetic materials to biological systems, creating artificial skin that could maintain sensation and flexibility, while providing protection against the extreme conditions of the deep ocean environment. The integration of biological tissue with synthetic materials represented one of the most technically challenging aspects of the entire transformation process, requiring advances in biomedical engineering that had never been attempted on such an extensive scale. The grafted materials needed to be compatible not only with the subject's existing tissue but also with the ADAM-based genetic modifications that would alter their cellular structure and metabolic processes, creating a complex interaction between natural and artificial systems that demanded unprecedented precision in both design and implementation. The atmospheric diving suits that were permanently integrated with the transformed workers represented a new generation of deep ocean equipment that incorporated lessons learned from years of conventional diving operations while also taking advantage of the enhanced capabilities that genetic modification made possible. These suits were not simply protective equipment, but integral parts of the subject's new physiology, providing life support functions that were directly connected to their modified cardiovascular and respiratory systems. The life support integration process required surgical procedures that connected the suit's atmospheric systems directly to the subject's modified respiratory apparatus, eliminating the need for conventional breathing equipment, while also creating a more efficient and reliable method of maintaining proper atmospheric conditions. These modifications allowed the transformed workers to operate for extended periods without the limitations imposed by conventional diving equipment, while also reducing the risk of equipment failure that had made traditional deep ocean work so dangerous. The strength and endurance enhancements that were achieved through ADAM-based genetic modifications exceeded even the most optimistic projections of the research team, as transformed subjects demonstrated the ability to lift objects weighing several tons and to work for extended periods without showing signs of fatigue. These improvements in physical capabilities were accompanied by enhanced reflexes and coordination that made the subjects more effective at performing complex technical tasks while wearing their integrated suits. But the genetic modifications also produced changes that went beyond simple improvements in strength and endurance, altering the subject's metabolic processes in ways that made them more efficient at utilizing available energy resources, while also changing their nutritional requirements and sleep patterns. These metabolic changes were necessary to support the enhanced physical capabilities that the modifications provided, but they also represented a fundamental departure from normal human biology that contributed to the subject's increasing isolation from conventional human society. The psychological effects of the transformation process were complex and difficult to predict, as subjects experienced not only the obvious changes associated with losing their ability to speak and having their bodies permanently integrated with mechanical systems, but also more subtle alterations in cognitive function and emotional responses that appeared to be related to the ADAM-based genetic modifications. These psychological changes were not necessarily negative, but they did represent significant departures from normal human mental functioning that affected the subject's ability to relate to their former colleagues and family members. The conditioning protocols that were developed to help transform subjects adapt to their new roles included extensive training in the technical skills required for their enhanced maintenance duties, as well as psychological preparation for the isolation and social changes that would result from their transformation. These programs represented an attempt to maintain some connection between the enhanced workers and their previous identities, while also preparing them for the realities of their new existence as permanently modified human-machine hybrids. The first successful transformations were hailed as remarkable achievements by Rapture's scientific community, demonstrating that the theoretical possibilities that had been discussed for months could indeed be translated into practical realities that solved real problems, while advancing the boundaries of human knowledge and capability. The transformed workers showed remarkable improvements in their ability to perform external maintenance tasks, completing repairs that would have been impossible using conventional diving equipment, while also demonstrating levels of efficiency and reliability that exceeded anything that had been achieved by traditional methods. But the success of these early transformations also revealed unexpected complications and challenges that had not been fully anticipated during the planning stages of the program. The transformed workers, while highly effective at their assigned tasks, showed signs of increasing psychological isolation and difficulty maintaining connections with their former lives and relationships. The changes in their physical appearance and capabilities, combined with their inability to communicate through normal speech, created barriers to social interaction that were more profound than the scientists had expected. The family members and friends of transformed workers struggled to adjust to the dramatic changes in their loved ones, often finding it difficult to maintain relationships with individuals who had become fundamentally different in both appearance and behavior. The social services that were established to help families cope with these changes proved inadequate for addressing the complex emotional and practical issues that arose when a family member underwent such radical transformation, creating additional stress and isolation for both the transformed workers and their relatives. The technical challenges of maintaining and upgrading the integrated systems that were now permanent parts of the transformed workers' bodies required the development of specialized medical and engineering procedures that went far beyond conventional maintenance protocols. The hybrid biological-mechanical nature of these systems created unique problems that required expertise in both biomedical engineering and advanced materials science, while the permanent integration of these systems made routine maintenance a complex and potentially dangerous process. The economic implications of the transformation program were significant and complex, as the enhanced capabilities of the modified workers created substantial savings in external maintenance costs, while also generating new expenses associated with the transformation procedures themselves and the specialized support systems required to maintain the enhanced workers. The long-term financial analysis suggested that the program would be economically beneficial, but the initial costs were substantial, and the long-term expenses were difficult to predict with certainty. The regulatory and legal questions raised by the transformation program required the development of entirely new frameworks for addressing the rights and responsibilities of individuals who had been so dramatically modified that they no longer fit conventional definitions of human workers. The contracts that were developed for transformed workers needed to address questions about compensation, working conditions, and legal protections that had never been considered in conventional employment law, while also establishing protocols for addressing the unique medical and social needs of the enhanced individuals. As the first generation of successfully transformed workers began to demonstrate their effectiveness in external maintenance operations, the program expanded to include additional volunteers who were eager to participate in procedures that offered both substantial financial benefits and the opportunity to become part of Rapture's most advanced technological paid species achievements. The success of the early transformations created demand for participation that exceeded the capacity of the research facilities to process new candidates, leading to the development of more efficient procedures and expanded infrastructure to support a larger number of enhanced workers. The scientific knowledge that was generated through the transformation program had implications that extended far beyond the immediate applications in external maintenance, as the techniques and technologies that were developed for creating enhanced workers could potentially be applied to a wide range of other challenges facing Rapture's society. The integration of biological and mechanical systems, the advanced genetic modification techniques, and the psychological conditioning protocols all represented innovations that could be adapted for other purposes, from medical treatments for serious injuries to enhancement programs for specialized military or industrial applications. The transformation of ordinary maintenance workers into enhanced human-machine hybrids represented a fundamental achievement in the history of genetic engineering and biomedical technology, demonstrating that the boundaries between human and machine were not as fixed as had previously been assumed, while also proving that carefully designed modifications could produce individuals who were capable of performing tasks that would have been impossible for unmodified humans. These early successes established the foundation for more ambitious projects that would eventually lead to the development of the Big Daddy program, setting the stage for innovations that would transform not just individual workers, but the entire social and technological landscape of Andrew Ryan's underwater civilization. The success of the initial transformation experiments had solved Rapture's most pressing infrastructure, maintenance challenges, but the very solution that had preserved the city's physical integrity now created an entirely new set of problems that would prove even more complex and morally challenging than the original engineering difficulties. The enhanced workers who had been created to perform external maintenance duties were indeed capable of remarkable feats of strength and endurance, but their isolation from normal human society and their increasing dependence on specialized support systems raised questions about their long-term welfare and their role in Rapture's evolving social structure. It was during this period of uncertainty about the future of the enhanced maintenance workers that Dr. Yi Su-chong made a discovery that would transform these isolated individuals from mere industrial assets into the centerpiece of one of the most ambitious and controversial programs ever undertaken in Andrew Ryan's underwater civilization. While conducting routine research into new applications for ADAM, Su-chong had been experimenting with methods for enhancing the compound's effectiveness by concentrating it within living organisms rather than extracting it for laboratory processing and commercial distribution. The creatures that emerged from Su-chong's experiments were young girls who had been systematically modified to serve as living processing units for ADAM, their bodies transformed into biological factories that could concentrate and refine the precious compound with an efficiency that far exceeded any mechanical system that had been developed in Rapture's laboratories. These children, who would become known as Little Sisters, represented both a breakthrough in ADAM production technology and a profound corruption of the protective instincts that formed the foundation of civilized society. The process by which ordinary children were transformed into Little Sisters involved genetic modifications that were even more radical than those used to create the enhanced maintenance workers, as the girls' entire digestive and metabolic systems were restructured to enable them to extract ADAM from biological sources and concentrate it within specialized organs that had been surgically implanted in their modified bodies. These procedures were irreversible and required the subjects to be maintained in a state of psychological conditioning that suppressed their natural human responses, while enhancing their effectiveness as biological processing units. The ethical implications of using children for such experiments were staggering and should have been sufficient to prevent any responsible scientist from pursuing such research, but the combination of ADAM's extraordinary value and the philosophical framework that governed scientific research in Rapture created an environment where moral constraints were subordinated to practical considerations and theoretical possibilities. The children who became Little Sisters were selected from Rapture's orphanages and foster care systems, chosen specifically because their lack of family connections made them less likely to be missed by the broader community. The conditioning process that transformed these children into effective ADAM processors required extensive psychological manipulation designed to suppress their natural fear and revulsion at the tasks they would be required to perform, while also instilling the behavioral patterns that would make them effective at locating and harvesting ADAM from the corpses of splicers and other sources throughout Rapture's increasingly dangerous environment. This conditioning involved techniques that were derived from military training programs and psychological research into behavior modification, adapted for use with young subjects whose developing minds were particularly susceptible to systematic influence. The deployment of Little Sisters throughout Rapture's public spaces created immediate and obvious risks to their safety, as the valuable ADAM that they carried made them attractive targets for desperate splicers who would not hesitate to harm or kill children in order to obtain the compound that they needed to support their addictions. The girls' small size and limited physical capabilities made them particularly vulnerable to attack, while their psychological conditioning made them incapable of recognizing or responding appropriately to many forms of danger that they might encounter during their collection activities. It was the recognition of these dangers that led Dr. Suchong to propose the most ambitious expansion of the human enhancement program that had yet been attempted, suggesting that the enhanced maintenance workers who had already been created for external operations could be modified further and redeployed as protective agents for the Little Sisters. This proposal represented a fundamental shift in the purpose and scope of the enhancement program, transforming it from a solution to specific technical problems into a comprehensive system for managing some of the most challenging social and economic issues facing Rapture's society. The concept of using genetically enhanced humans as protectors for the Little Sisters appealed to Andrew Ryan for multiple reasons that went beyond simple, practical considerations about safety and security. The program would provide a productive use for the enhanced workers who had completed their external maintenance duties, while also creating a visible demonstration of Rapture's technological superiority and its ability to solve complex problems through scientific innovation rather than conventional social policy. The prospect of having powerful guardian figures patrolling Rapture's streets also offered psychological benefits for the general population, who could feel safer knowing that such formidable protectors were maintaining order in their city. But the transformation of maintenance workers into protectors would require modifications that went far beyond the enhancements that had been necessary for external operations, as the protective role demanded not only physical capabilities, but also sophisticated behavioral conditioning that would ensure the enhanced individuals would respond appropriately to threats against their charges while remaining manageable by Rapture's civilian authorities. The psychological programming required for this role was more complex than anything that had previously been attempted, involving the creation of artificial emotional bonds that would motivate the protectors to risk their lives for children they had never known before their transformation. The recruitment process for the Protector program could not rely on voluntary participation as the maintenance worker program had done, since the nature of the conditioning required for protective duties would fundamentally alter the subject's personalities and emotional responses in ways that made informed consent essentially meaningless. Instead, the program turned to Rapture's criminal justice system and psychiatric facilities for subjects, selecting individuals whose social status made their disappearance less likely to attract attention or investigation from the broader community. Dr. Sophia Lamb, a psychiatrist who had been imprisoned by Andrew Ryan for promoting collectivist ideologies that challenged his individualistic philosophy, was released from detention specifically to serve as the psychological evaluator for potential protector candidates. Lamb's expertise in behavioral conditioning and her willingness to collaborate with the program despite her political differences with Ryan made her an ideal choice for developing the psychological profiles and conditioning protocols. that would be necessary for creating effective protectors. The irony of using a political prisoner whose ideological commitments were fundamentally opposed to Ryan's vision to help create the ultimate expression of his technological ambitions was not lost on either Lamb or the administrators of the Protector program, but the practical benefits of her expertise outweighed the philosophical contradictions involved in her participation. Lamb's understanding of human psychology and her experience with behavioral modification techniques proved essential for developing conditioning protocols that could create the artificial, emotional bonds necessary for the protective relationship. The selection criteria that Lamb developed for Protector candidates emphasized psychological stability, capacity for emotional attachment, and physical resilience, while also considering factors such as criminal history, mental health status, and social connections that might complicate the conditioning process or create problems after the transformation was completed. The candidates who were ultimately selected represented the most marginalized and isolated members of Rapture's population, individuals whose disappearance would be unlikely to trigger investigations or protests from other citizens. The conditioning process that was developed for Protector candidates was far more extensive and psychologically invasive than anything that had been used for the maintenance workers, involving techniques that were designed to create artificial parental instincts toward the little sisters, while simultaneously suppressing the subject's capacity for independent decision-making that might interfere with their effectiveness as protectors. This conditioning required weeks of intensive treatment that combined pharmaceutical intervention with psychological manipulation and behavioral training, creating artificial emotional bonds that were stronger and more reliable than natural human relationships. The artificial nature of these emotional bonds was both a strength and a weakness of the Protector program, as the conditioned responses were more intense and consistent than natural protective instincts, while also being completely dependent on the continuation of the conditioning protocols that maintained them. The Protectors' devotion to their little sisters was absolute and unwavering, but it was also fundamentally mechanical rather than genuinely emotional, creating relationships that resembled parental care while lacking the spontaneity and adaptability that characterized natural human bonds. The one-way nature of the transformation process was emphasized repeatedly during the preparation of candidates, though the psychological conditioning that preceded the physical modifications meant that most subjects were no longer capable of fully understanding or responding to these warnings by the time they were given. The irreversible nature of the procedures was considered a feature rather than a flaw by the program's administrators, as it ensured that protectors would remain committed to their duties regardless of changing circumstances or personal preferences that might otherwise interfere with their effectiveness. The establishment of bonding protocols between protectors and little sisters required careful coordination between the psychological conditioning of both groups, creating artificial relationships that served the practical needs of the ADAM collection program, while also providing some emotional support for the children who had been isolated from normal human social connections through their own transformation process. These protocols were designed to create mutual dependency that would enhance the effectiveness of both the protectors and their charges, while minimizing the risks associated with independent action by either group. The ethical debates that surrounded the Protector program were more intense and divisive than those that had accompanied the development of enhanced maintenance workers, as the use of criminals and the mentally ill as unwilling subjects for radical experimentation raised questions about consent, human rights, and the moral foundations of Rapture's society. The program's defenders, argued that the subjects were already marginalized individuals whose transformation would benefit society while providing them with meaningful roles that they could not have achieved through conventional means. While critics maintained that no practical benefits could justify the systematic violation of human dignity that the program represented, the scientific community in Rapture was deeply divided about the Protector program, with some researchers viewing it as a logical extension of successful enhancement techniques, while others considered it a dangerous precedent that could lead to increasingly extreme forms of human experimentation. The economic benefits of the program were undeniable, as the enhanced ADAM production capabilities of the protected Little Sisters generated enormous revenues for Rapture's economy, but the social costs were more difficult to quantify and increasingly difficult to ignore. The religious and philosophical implications of creating artificial parental bonds between transformed humans raised questions about the nature of love, family, and human relationships that had never been seriously considered by Rapture's secular leadership. The Protectors' devotion to their Little Sisters was genuine in its intensity and effects, but its artificial origin challenged conventional understanding of what constituted authentic human emotion, and whether such artificially created bonds could be considered morally equivalent to natural relationships. The legal framework that was developed to govern the Protector program required extensive modifications to Rapture's existing laws and regulations, as the transformed individuals did not fit conventional categories of citizenship, employment, or legal responsibility. The contracts and agreements that established their status within Rapture's society had to address questions about their rights, obligations, and legal protections that had never been considered in any previous legal system, while also establishing protocols for managing their unique needs and capabilities. The training programs that prepared Protectors for their duties combined physical conditioning with tactical instruction and behavioral reinforcement, designed to enhance their effectiveness in protecting the Little Sisters while operating in Rapture's increasingly dangerous environment. These programs emphasized situational awareness, threat assessment, and response protocols that would enable the Protectors to identify and neutralize potential dangers to their charges, while minimizing the risk of collateral damage to innocent bystanders or valuable infrastructure. The weapons and equipment that were developed specifically for the Protector program reflected both the enhanced physical capabilities of the transformed subjects and the unique requirements of their protective mission, combining advanced materials and engineering with designs that took advantage of the Protectors' modified strength and coordination. The integration of these weapons with the subjects' modified physiology created human-machine hybrids that were more effective than either conventional soldiers or mechanical systems would have been in protecting the valuable Little Sisters. The deployment of the first Protector Little Sister pairs throughout Rapture's public spaces marked a fundamental transformation in the city's social and economic landscape, creating a new category of citizen worker that existed outside conventional social hierarchies, while performing functions that were essential for the continued prosperity of Andrew Ryan's underwater civilization. The sight of these pairs moving through the city's elegant corridors represented both the triumph of human ingenuity over natural limitations and the profound moral compromises that such achievements required. The public reaction to the Protector program was complex and contradictory, as citizens simultaneously admired the technological achievements that the program represented while feeling disturbed by the obvious signs of the human cost that such innovations required. The Protectors' obvious devotion to their charges was touching and impressive, but the artificial nature of their conditioning and the irreversible modifications to their bodies created an uncanny valley effect that made many observers uncomfortable, despite their intellectual appreciation for the program's benefits. As the Protector program expanded to include larger numbers of subjects and began to demonstrate its effectiveness in maintaining the safety of the Little Sisters and the efficiency of ADAM collection operations. It became clear that the transformation of maintenance workers into protective agents had created not just a solution to immediate practical problems, but also the foundation for entirely new approaches to social organization and human fruition, enhancement that would reshape every aspect of life in Rapture. The success of the program validated the most ambitious claims about the potential of genetic modification and behavioral conditioning to solve complex social problems, while also raising questions about the ultimate direction and consequences of such systematic intervention in human nature and social relationships. Among the countless stories of transformation and tragedy that marked the development of Rapture's Protector program, none would prove as significant or as ultimately destructive as the tale of a man who discovered Andrew Ryan's underwater paradise entirely by accident, becoming through a series of circumstances beyond his control, the prototype for a new generation of enhanced guardians whose very existence would eventually challenge the fundamental assumptions upon which the entire program had been built. The man who would become Subject Delta began his journey to this fate not as a volunteer or a criminal selected for transformation, but as an innocent deep-sea diver whose professional expertise would lead him into the depths where Rapture waited in its magnificent isolation. Johnny Topside had spent the better part of 2 decades working as a commercial deep-sea diver, specializing in the kind of extreme depth operations that most diving professionals considered too dangerous or technically challenging to be worth the substantial risks involved. His reputation in the diving community was built on his ability to complete complex underwater construction and salvage projects at depths that challenged even the most advanced diving equipment, while maintaining the kind of calm professionalism that made clients willing to pay premium rates for his services despite the availability of less expensive alternatives. The project that would ultimately lead Johnny to Rapture was a routine salvage operation involving a cargo vessel that had sunk in the North Atlantic during a storm, carrying a manifest of industrial equipment that was valuable enough to justify the expense and risk of deep water recovery efforts. The insurance company that had commissioned the salvage operation had selected Johnny specifically because of his experience with extreme depth work and his track record of successfully completing projects that other diving teams had been forced to abandon due to technical difficulties or safety concerns. The diving bell that carried Johnny to the ocean floor on that fateful day in 1958 was equipped with the most advanced life support and communication systems available to commercial diving operations. But even the best surface-based equipment of that era was inadequate for the challenges posed by operations at such extreme depths. The descent through nearly 2 miles of black water was a journey that few human beings had ever experienced, passing through layers of ocean that remained as unexplored and alien as the surface of distant planets. The cargo vessel that Johnny had been sent to investigate lay broken and scattered across the ocean floor, its hull fractured by the impact of its collision with the seafloor, and further damaged by years of exposure to the corrosive effects of deep ocean currents and the immense pressure that existed at such depths. The wreckage was spread across a considerable area, making it necessary for Johnny to conduct an extensive survey before he could begin the process of identifying and recovering the valuable equipment that had been lost with the ship. It was during this survey work that Johnny first encountered signs of human activity that seemed impossible at such depths, discovering structures and installations that clearly indicated the presence of a substantial underwater facility in an area where no such construction should have been possible, according to any publicly available information about deep ocean development projects. The sophisticated engineering and advanced materials that were evident in these structures suggested capabilities that exceeded anything that Johnny had encountered in his years of commercial diving work. The initial discovery of what appeared to be an entrance to an underwater facility presented Johnny with a dilemma that would ultimately determine the course of his remaining life, as his professional curiosity and diving expertise drew him toward investigating the mysterious installation, while his practical experience warned him that approaching unknown underwater structures could be extremely dangerous. The decision to investigate further was motivated partly by legitimate concerns about the safety implications of undisclosed underwater installations in areas where commercial diving operations might encounter them, and partly by simple human curiosity about the nature and purpose of such an ambitious engineering project. The entrance that Johnny discovered led to an airlock system that was far more sophisticated than anything he had seen in conventional underwater installations, incorporating advanced materials and engineering principles that suggested access to technologies that were not available through normal commercial or military channels. The successful navigation of this airlock system required technical skills that Johnny possessed due to his extensive experience with underwater construction projects. But the level of sophistication involved made it clear that he was encountering something far beyond the scope of typical underwater facilities. The interior of the installation that Johnny discovered was unlike anything that existed in the surface world, combining architectural grandeur with technological sophistication in ways that created an environment that seemed to belong in the realm of science fiction rather than practical engineering. The Art Deco styling and luxurious appointments that characterized the facility's design suggested enormous financial resources and sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities, while the advanced life support systems and structural engineering demonstrated capabilities that exceeded even the most ambitious underwater projects that had been attempted by surface governments or corporations. The realization that he had discovered not just an underwater facility, but an entire underwater city was overwhelming and disorienting for Johnny, whose experience with deep ocean work had not prepared him for the existence of such an ambitious and extensive installation. The scope and sophistication of what he observed challenged his understanding of what was technologically possible, while the obvious signs of a substantial population raised questions about how such a city could exist without being known to surface governments or international organizations that monitored ocean development activities. The citizens of Rapture, who first encountered Johnny, were as surprised by his presence as he was by the existence of their city, since the security measures that protected the underwater metropolis were supposed to prevent unauthorized access by surface dwellers who might compromise the secrecy that was essential for maintaining the city's independence from surface world governments and organizations. The fact that a single individual had managed to penetrate these defenses using only conventional diving equipment raised serious concerns about the effectiveness of the security systems and the possibility that other surface dwellers might discover the city's location. The initial response of Rapture's authorities to Johnny's arrival was cautious but not immediately hostile, as they recognized that his accidental discovery of the city created both risks and opportunities that required careful consideration before determining how to proceed. The interrogation process that followed his capture was designed to determine not only how he had discovered the city, but also what surface organizations might become aware of his disappearance and begin investigating the circumstances that had led to his vanishing. Dr. Gilbert Alexander, a genetic biologist whose research into human enhancement had made him one of Rapture's most respected and influential scientists, became involved in Johnny's case. When it became apparent that the surface diver's accidental arrival might provide an opportunity to test new approaches to the Protector program that had been under development but had not yet been implemented with human subjects, Alexander's expertise in genetic modification and behavioral conditioning made him ideally suited to evaluate Johnny's potential as a candidate for experimental procedures that could advance the scientific understanding of human enhancement, while also solving the immediate security problem posed by his knowledge of Rapture's existence. The evaluation process that Alexander conducted revealed that Johnny possessed many of the physical and psychological characteristics that made ideal candidates for the Protector program, including exceptional physical fitness, demonstrated ability to function effectively under extreme stress, and psychological stability that suggested he would be able to adapt to the radical modifications required for transformation into an enhanced Guardian. His background as a deep-sea diver had already conditioned him to function in isolated, high-pressure environments that were similar in many respects to the conditions that Protectors would face in their duties throughout Rapture. But Alexander's interest in Johnny went beyond simple evaluation of his suitability as a Protector candidate, extending to the possibility of using him as a test subject for new bonding techniques that might solve some of the limitations that had been identified in the existing Protector program. The current conditioning protocols were effective at creating protective behaviors, but they were also expensive and time-consuming, requiring extensive preparation and producing results that were sometimes inconsistent or incomplete. The development of more efficient and reliable bonding techniques was considered a high priority for expanding the program to meet Rapture's growing security needs. The breakthrough that Alexander achieved with Johnny involved the development of what he termed pair bonding technology, a conditioning technique that created an exclusive and permanent emotional attachment between a Protector and a single little sister, rather than the more generalized protective instincts that characterized the standard conditioning protocols. This pair bonding approach promised to create stronger and more reliable protective behaviors, while also reducing the resources required for conditioning and maintenance of the artificial emotional attachments. The conditioning process that was used to create Johnny's transformation into Subject Delta represented the culmination of years of research into human psychology and behavioral modification, combining advanced pharmaceutical interventions with psychological manipulation techniques that had been refined through extensive experimentation with previous Protector candidates. The process was designed not only to create the necessary protective behaviors, but also to suppress memories and personality characteristics that might interfere with the subject's effectiveness as a Guardian. The physical modifications that accompanied Johnny's psychological conditioning were among the most extensive that had been attempted in the Protector program, incorporating not only the standard enhancements in strength and endurance, but also specialized adaptations that were designed to optimize his effectiveness in protecting a single little sister, rather than responding to more generalized threats. These modifications included sensory enhancements that would allow him to detect potential dangers to his charge more effectively, as well as structural changes that would enable him to provide more comprehensive protection in combat situations. The integration of Johnny's consciousness with the artificial intelligence systems that controlled many aspects of Protector behavior represented a significant advancement in the technology of human-machine integration, creating a hybrid entity that combined human intuition and adaptability with mechanical reliability and consistency. This integration was more extensive than anything that had been attempted with previous Protector candidates, requiring surgical procedures that permanently altered the subject's brain structure, while also installing hardware that connected his consciousness to Rapture's computer networks. The little sister who was selected to be paired with Subject Delta was a young girl named Eleanor Lamb, whose selection for the program was based partly on her genetic compatibility with ADAM processing modifications, and partly on her psychological profile, which suggested that she would respond well to the intensive conditioning required for her role. Eleanor's transformation into a little sister involved the same radical modifications that had been used with previous candidates, but her pairing with Subject Delta created opportunities for more sophisticated coordination between Protector and Charge that had not been possible with the standard conditioning protocols. The bonding process that created the connection between Subject Delta and Eleanor Lamb was more extensive and intimate than anything that had been attempted in the Protector program, involving not only artificial, emotional attachment, but also neurological connections that allowed for a form of communication and coordination that transcended normal human social interaction. This bonding created a relationship that was simultaneously more artificial and more profound than natural human relationships, combining mechanical reliability with emotional intensity in ways that challenged conventional understanding of both love and technology. The success of the pair bonding technique that was demonstrated through the Subject Delta project was hailed as a major breakthrough in the science of human enhancement and behavioral modification, proving that artificial emotional attachments could be created with greater precision and reliability than had previously been thought possible. The implications of this success extended far beyond the immediate applications in the Protector program, suggesting possibilities for therapeutic interventions in cases of emotional trauma and relationship dysfunction that could revolutionize approaches to mental health treatment. But the pair bonding technique also created vulnerabilities that had not been present in the standard conditioning protocols, as the exclusive nature of the attachment meant that protectors who lost their paired little sisters would be left without any meaningful purpose or emotional connection to sustain their continued existence. This limitation was considered acceptable by the program's administrators, who viewed the protectors as expendable resources, whose value was entirely dependent on their ability to perform their protective function. The deployment of Subject Delta and Eleanor Lamb as the first successfully pair-bonded Protector team marked the beginning of what was initially considered the most successful phase of the Protector program, as their coordination and effectiveness exceeded all previous results, while also demonstrating the potential for creating even more advanced forms of human enhancement through continued research and development. The pair's ability to function as a coordinated unit in protecting Eleanor's ADAM collection activities was remarkable, while their obvious emotional connection provided a model for future bonding protocols that could enhance both the effectiveness and the psychological stability of enhanced guardians. The observation and study of Subject Delta's behavior and performance provided valuable data about the effectiveness of the new conditioning techniques, while also revealing unexpected aspects of the pair bonding process that had not been anticipated during the development phase. The depth and intensity of the artificial emotional attachment proved to be greater than had been expected, creating behaviors that resembled genuine parental love, while also maintaining the mechanical reliability that was essential for the protective function. The psychological impact of the pair bonding process on Eleanor Lamb was equally significant, as her conditioning included modifications that enhanced her emotional attachment to Subject Delta, while also maintaining the behavioral patterns necessary for effective ADAM collection. The relationship that developed between the pair was genuine in its effects and intensity, even though its artificial origin meant that it had been created through scientific intervention rather than natural human development. The success of the Subject Delta project established him as the prototype for what would become known as the Alpha series of Big Daddies, a new generation of enhanced protectors whose pair bonding capabilities represented a significant advancement over the standard conditioning protocols that had been used for previous generations. The techniques and technologies that were developed through his transformation would serve as the foundation for future Protector programs, while his continued effectiveness as Eleanor's guardian provided ongoing validation for the scientific principles underlying the enhancement process. As Subject Delta and Eleanor Lamb began their duties as Rapture's first pair-bonded Protector team, their success seemed to validate the most optimistic predictions about the future of human enhancement and the potential for creating artificial relationships that could serve practical purposes while also providing genuine emotional satisfaction for all parties involved. The sight of the massive, mechanically enhanced Guardian moving through Rapture's elegant corridors in devoted protection of his small charge became a symbol of the city's technological achievements and its ability to solve complex social problems through scientific innovation and careful engineering of human nature itself. The triumph of Subject Delta's successful pair bonding with Eleanor Lamb had seemed to vindicate the most ambitious goals of the Protector program, demonstrating that artificial emotional attachments could be created with unprecedented precision and intensity, while producing guardians whose effectiveness exceeded all previous achievements in the field of human enhancement. But this very success contained within it the seeds of a fundamental limitation that would ultimately prove to be the Alpha Series' greatest weakness, transforming what had initially appeared to be a breakthrough in behavioral conditioning into a critical vulnerability that threatened the entire future of the Enhanced Protector program. The exclusive nature of the pair bonding that connected Subject Delta to Eleanor Lamb created a relationship that was remarkably powerful and effective, but it also meant that each Alpha Series Protector was permanently committed to a single little sister whose loss would render the Guardian essentially useless for any other protective function. This limitation had been recognized during the development process, but it had been accepted as a reasonable trade-off for the enhanced effectiveness and reliability that the pair bonding technique provided compared to the more generalized protective instincts that characterized earlier conditioning protocols. The practical implications of this limitation became apparent only after the Alpha Series had been deployed for several months, and administrators began to encounter situations where little sisters were lost, injured, or needed to be reassigned for operational reasons that were unrelated to their protector's performance or capabilities. The Alpha Series Guardians who found themselves separated from their paired charges displayed severe psychological distress that manifested in behaviors ranging from complete withdrawal and refusal to function to violent outbursts that posed dangers to both themselves and the surrounding population. The first documented case of Alpha Series breakdown occurred when Subject Gamma's paired little sister, a young girl named Miranda, suffered a fatal accident during routine ADAM collection activities in one of Rapture's industrial districts. The mechanical failure of a ventilation system had exposed her to toxic fumes that proved lethal despite the enhanced physiology that should have provided protection against most environmental hazards. Subject Gamma's response to Miranda's death was immediate and devastating, as the artificial emotional bond that had defined his existence created a form of grief that exceeded anything that had been observed in previous Protector subjects. The psychological autopsy that was conducted following Subject Gamma's complete mental breakdown revealed that the pair bonding process had created neural pathways and emotional dependencies that were far more profound and extensive than the scientists had anticipated when designing the conditioning protocols. The artificial love that connected the Alpha Series Protectors to their charges was not merely a behavioral modification, but a fundamental restructuring of consciousness that made the Guardians' sense of identity and purpose completely dependent on their relationship with their paired little sisters. The attempts that were made to reassign orphaned Alpha Series Protectors to new little sisters proved uniformly unsuccessful, as the conditioning protocols that had created their exclusive attachments made it impossible for them to form meaningful protective relationships with replacement charges. The artificial emotional bonds that had been engineered to provide motivation and direction for the Protector's behavior were too specific and too deeply ingrained to be modified or redirected without essentially destroying the subject's psychological integrity and functional capabilities. Subject Theta's failed reassignment to a new little sister named Priscilla provided particularly compelling evidence of the irreversible nature of Alpha series bonding, as the Protector's attempts to form a protective relationship with his new charge resulted in increasingly severe psychological distress that manifested in hallucinations, violent episodes, and complete breakdown of his ability to function as an effective guardian. The monitoring equipment that tracked Theta's neurological activity during the reassignment process revealed massive disruption in the brain regions that governed emotional attachment and behavioral motivation, suggesting that the pair bonding process had created dependencies that could not be severed without causing irreparable damage to the subject's consciousness. The economic implications of these limitations were severe, as each Alpha series protector represented an enormous investment in research, development, and manufacturing resources that became completely worthless if their paired little sister was lost or injured. The administrators who managed Rapture's human enhancement programs found themselves facing the prospect of maintaining expensive and highly specialized assets that could not be redeployed or repurposed when circumstances changed, creating financial pressures that threatened the long-term viability of the entire Protector program. Dr. Yi Su-chong, whose research had contributed significantly to the development of the Alpha series, was deeply frustrated by these limitations and began working on alternative approaches to Protector conditioning that might preserve the advantages of artificial emotional bonding while eliminating the inflexibility that made the pair bonding technique impractical for large-scale deployment. His laboratory became the focal point for intensive research into the neurological and biochemical mechanisms that governed artificial emotional attachment, as he sought to understand why the Alpha series conditioning had proven so resistant to modification or adaptation. The research that Su-chong conducted into alternative bonding approaches involved extensive experimentation with different conditioning protocols, pharmaceutical interventions, and surgical techniques that might create more flexible forms of artificial emotional attachment. His test subjects, drawn from the same populations of criminals and mentally ill individuals that had provided candidates for previous Protector programs, were subjected to increasingly aggressive and experimental procedures as Su-chong pursued solutions to the Alpha series' fundamental design flaws. The failure of these early experiments to produce viable alternatives to pair bonding created mounting pressure from Rapture's administrators, who were beginning to question whether the resources being devoted to Protector development might be better allocated to other security and economic programs that could provide more reliable and cost-effective solutions to the city's challenges. The political implications of these doubts extended beyond simple budgetary considerations, as the Protector program had become a symbol of Rapture's technological superiority and Andrew Ryan's vision of human enhancement through scientific achievement. Su-chong's efforts to develop more adaptable bonding protocols had been unsuccessful for months, producing test subjects who either failed to develop adequate protective instincts or who displayed unpredictable and potentially dangerous behavioral responses to their conditioning. The complexity of the neurological systems that governed emotional attachment made it extraordinarily difficult to create artificial bonds that were both powerful enough to motivate protective behavior and flexible enough to be modified or redirected when circumstances required adaptation. The breakthrough that would eventually lead to the development of improved bonding techniques came not through deliberate experimentation, but through an accidental discovery that occurred during routine maintenance of the little sister's ADAM processing capabilities. Su-chong had been investigating methods for enhancing the efficiency of ADAM extraction and concentration when he observed that the little sister's productivity and psychological stability both improved significantly when they were allowed to share small amounts of the processed ADAM with their protectors as a form of reward or positive reinforcement. This observation suggested that the artificial emotional bonds that had been created through conditioning might be strengthened and made more flexible through the use of ADAM as a biological reward system that could reinforce protective behaviors while also creating a form of mutual dependence between protectors and little sisters. The ADAM that the little sisters processed contained properties that affected brain chemistry in ways that could enhance emotional attachment and reduce the psychological stress associated with separation or loss, while also providing protectors with enhanced physical capabilities that made them more effective guardians. The biochemical analysis of ADAM's effects on neural tissue revealed that the compound interacted with the same neurotransmitter systems that governed natural emotional bonding, but in ways that were more controllable and predictable than the complex psychological processes that characterized normal human relationships. The possibility of using ADAM to create artificial emotional attachments that could be modified or enhanced through controlled exposure offered a potential solution to the inflexibility that had made the Alpha series impractical for widespread deployment. The collaboration with Elizabeth, a young scientist whose expertise in behavioral psychology complemented Suchong's knowledge of genetic modification and ADAM research, proved essential for understanding the complex interactions between chemical reward systems and artificial emotional bonding that would be necessary for creating more adaptable protector conditioning protocols. Elizabeth's research into the neurological mechanisms that governed emotional attachment provided crucial insights into how ADAM's biochemical properties could be used to create more flexible and sustainable artificial relationships. Elizabeth's background in experimental psychology had provided her with theoretical frameworks for understanding how artificial emotional bonds could be created and modified through systematic intervention in the neural systems that governed attachment behavior. Her previous work with laboratory animals had demonstrated that emotional responses could be conditioned and reconditioned through careful manipulation of reward systems and environmental stimuli, suggesting that similar approaches might be effective with human subjects who had been enhanced through ADAM-based modifications. The development of what came to be known as multi-charge bonding represented a significant advancement over the pair bonding techniques that had been used for the Alpha series, creating protectors who could form protective relationships with multiple little sisters while maintaining the intensity and reliability of artificial emotional attachment that made them effective guardians. This new approach required more sophisticated conditioning protocols and more careful management of the biochemical reward systems that maintained the artificial bonds, but it promised to eliminate the inflexibility that had made the Alpha series impractical for widespread deployment. The theoretical foundation for multi-charge bonding was based on the recognition that emotional attachment could be understood as a form of neural network that could be programmed and reprogrammed through systematic intervention into the biochemical processes that govern synaptic connections and neurotransmitter production. By using ADAM to enhance the plasticity of these neural networks, researchers could create artificial emotional bonds that were both powerful enough to motivate protective behavior and flexible enough to accommodate multiple charges or changes in assignment. The testing of multi-charge bonding techniques required extensive experimentation with volunteer subjects who had agreed to undergo prototype conditioning procedures in exchange for substantial financial compensation and the promise of enhanced physical capabilities that would make them valuable assets in Rapture's increasingly competitive labor market. These early test subjects provided valuable data about the effectiveness and safety of the new conditioning protocols, while also serving as proof-of-concept demonstrations for administrators who were considering expanding the Protector program to include larger numbers of enhanced guardians. The laboratory environment where Suchong conducted his bonding experiments was equipped with sophisticated monitoring and control systems that allowed for precise measurement of the subject's physiological and psychological responses to different conditioning protocols and biochemical interventions. The complexity of these systems reflected the advanced state of Rapture's scientific infrastructure, while also demonstrating the enormous resources that were being devoted to perfecting the technology of human enhancement and behavioral modification. The monitoring equipment that tracked the subject's neural activity during conditioning procedures revealed that multi-charge bonding created patterns of brain activation that were distinctly different from those observed in pair-bonded alpha series protectors. While the alpha series showed intense but narrow patterns of activation focused on specific neural pathways associated with exclusive attachment, the multi-charge subjects displayed broader but equally intense patterns that suggested the capacity for multiple simultaneous emotional bonds without the psychological instability that characterized attempts to reassign alpha series protectors. The breakthrough moment that validated the effectiveness of multi-charge bonding occurred during a routine experimental session when one of the test subjects successfully formed protective attachments to two different little sisters while maintaining appropriate behavioral responses to both charges. This demonstration proved that the theoretical framework underlying the new conditioning protocols was sound, while also providing practical evidence that the limitations of pair bonding could indeed be overcome through more sophisticated approaches to artificial emotional attachment. The subject who achieved this breakthrough was a former construction worker named William Harper, whose psychological profile and genetic compatibility had made him an ideal candidate for experimental conditioning procedures. Harper's ability to simultaneously protect two little sisters named Susan and Margaret, while maintaining distinct but equally intense emotional bonds with each child, represented a fundamental advancement in the science of artificial emotional attachment and provided the foundation for developing production-scale multi-charge bonding protocols. But the success of this experiment was overshadowed by a tragic incident that would ultimately cost Dr. Suchong his life, while also providing a dramatic demonstration of the power and dangers associated with the artificial emotional bonds that his research had created. During a recording session designed to document the effectiveness of the new bonding protocols, Suchong became frustrated with one of the little sisters who was not responding appropriately to his instructions and struck the child in a moment of anger and impatience that reflected his scientific detachment from the human consequences of his research. The little sister who bore the brunt of Suchong's anger was a girl named Catherine, who had been paired with a multi-charge protector designated Subject Mu as part of the ongoing evaluation of the new bonding protocols. Catherine's slow response to Suchong's commands during the recording session had been due to fatigue and confusion rather than deliberate disobedience, but the scientist's growing frustration with the pace of his research had made him increasingly impatient, with delays and complications that interfered with his documentation of the experimental results. The response of Subject Mu to this assault on his charge was immediate and lethal, as the artificial emotional attachment that Suchong's own research had created compelled the enhanced guardian to defend Catherine with the same intensity and violence that a natural parent might display when protecting their child from a perceived threat. The protector's drill pierced Suchong's body before he could react to the danger he had created, killing him instantly, while also providing a shocking demonstration of the power and authenticity of the artificial emotional bonds that his conditioning protocols had established. The death of Dr. Suchong represented both a personal tragedy and a scientific validation of the research that had consumed years of his professional life. proving that the artificial emotional attachments created through his conditioning techniques were genuine in their effects, even though they were artificial in their origin. The Protector's response to the perceived threat against his charge demonstrated that the bonding protocols could create protective instincts that were as powerful and reliable as any natural emotional attachment, while also revealing the potential dangers associated with creating beings whose artificial conditioning made them capable of extreme violence in defense of their assigned responsibilities. The audio recordings that captured Suchong's final moments provided valuable data about the effectiveness of multi-charge bonding, while also serving as a sobering reminder of the risks associated with working with enhanced human subjects whose conditioning made them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The Protector's immediate and uncompromising response to the threat against Catherine demonstrated that the artificial emotional bonds were functioning exactly as designed, creating protective behaviors that were both more reliable and more intense than natural human relationships. The investigation that followed Suchong's death revealed that the bonding system that he had developed was indeed working as intended, creating artificial emotional relationships that were powerful enough to motivate extreme protective behaviors, while also being flexible enough to allow protectors to form attachments to multiple charges simultaneously. The tragedy that had cost the scientist his life also provided crucial validation for the theoretical framework underlying the multi-charge bonding approach, demonstrating that the new conditioning protocols could create reliable and effective protectors who would not be limited by the inflexibility that had made the Alpha series impractical for large-scale deployment. The completion of Suchong's research by his surviving colleagues led to the development of refined bonding protocols that incorporated lessons learned from both his successes and the circumstances of his death, creating conditioning techniques that were more effective and safer than anything that had previously been achieved in the field of behavioral modification and artificial emotional attachment. These improved protocols formed the foundation for the next generation of Big Daddy protectors, whose capabilities would exceed those of the Alpha series, while avoiding the critical limitations that had made the earlier models unsuitable for widespread use. Elizabeth's analysis of the conditioning data that had been collected during Suchong's final experiments revealed that the multi-charge bonding approach had achieved remarkable success in creating flexible and reliable artificial emotional attachments, but had also highlighted the need for additional safeguards to prevent the kind of violence that had resulted in the scientist's death. The protocols that emerged from this analysis included enhanced safety measures and modified behavioral conditioning that would preserve the protector's effectiveness while reducing the risks associated with their deployment in populated areas. The psychological analysis of Subject Mu following his killing of Suchong revealed that the artificial emotional bond that connected him to Catherine was genuine in its intensity and effects, creating a form of artificial parenthood that was both more reliable and more consistent than natural human relationships, while also being more vulnerable to manipulation and control by those who understood the conditioning protocols that maintained it. This analysis provided valuable insights into the nature of artificial emotional attachment, while also raising important questions about the ethics and long-term consequences of creating beings whose deepest motivations were the products of scientific intervention rather than natural development. The decision to retire the Alpha series in favor of improved protector models was made reluctantly by Rapture's administrators, who recognized that the pair-bonded guardians had been remarkably effective within their limitations, but were ultimately too inflexible and too vulnerable to loss of their charges to be practical for the expanding security needs of the underwater city. The Alpha series protectors who remained functional were gradually reassigned to less critical duties or placed in reserve status, while resources were redirected toward the development and deployment of the new generation of multi-charge bonded protectors. The fate of Subject Delta and the other Alpha Series protectors who had successfully completed their initial missions reflected the utilitarian approach that characterized much of Rapture's human enhancement program, as these enhanced individuals were treated primarily as valuable assets whose continued usefulness was determined by their ability to serve practical functions within the city's economic and security systems. The artificial nature of their emotional attachments made it easier for administrators to justify decisions that prioritized efficiency and adaptability over the welfare of beings who had once been human, but whose transformation had placed them outside conventional moral categories. The legacy of the Alpha series extended far beyond their immediate practical contributions to Rapture's security, as the techniques and technologies that had been developed for their creation served as the foundation for more advanced approaches to human enhancement and behavioral modification that would reshape every aspect of life in Andrew Ryan's underwater civilization. The lessons learned from both the successes and failures of the pair bonding approach provided crucial insights into the possibilities and limitations of artificial emotional attachment, while also demonstrating the potential for creating beings who could transcend normal human capabilities while remaining fundamentally human in their deepest motivations and emotional responses. The lessons learned from the Alpha series limitations and Dr. Suchong's tragic death provided the scientific foundation for developing a new generation of protectors whose capabilities would exceed their predecessors while avoiding the critical vulnerabilities that had made the pair-bonded Guardians unsuitable for large-scale deployment. Throughout Rapture's increasingly complex social and economic environment, the design philosophy that guided this next phase of development emphasized versatility and adaptability over the specialized excellence that had characterized the Alpha series. Recognizing that the future security needs of Andrew Ryan's underwater civilization would require protectors who could respond effectively to a wide range of threats and operational requirements. The engineering challenges that confronted the development team responsible for creating these new protector models were fundamentally different from those that had been addressed in previous generations, as the multi-charge bonding protocols that had emerged from Suchong's research required corresponding modifications to the physical design and weapon systems that would enable the enhanced Guardians to protect multiple little sisters simultaneously while operating in the diverse environments that characterized Rapture's sprawling urban landscape. The new protectors would need to be more mobile and adaptable than their predecessors, while also possessing the durability and combat effectiveness necessary to defend their charges against increasingly sophisticated and desperate opponents. The development process that produced these new protector models involved extensive collaboration between Rapture's most advanced research facilities and manufacturing centers, requiring coordination between teams of engineers, physicians, psychologists, and technicians who brought specialized expertise to different aspects of the complex project. The interdisciplinary nature of this work reflected the maturation of Rapture's human enhancement capabilities and the recognition that creating effective protectors required advances in multiple scientific and technical fields. Simultaneously, the manufacturing infrastructure that was established to support mass production of the new protector models represented one of the most sophisticated industrial programs ever undertaken in Rapture, incorporating advanced materials science, precision engineering, and quality control systems that ensured each completed Guardian would meet the exacting standards necessary for effective operation in the city's challenging environment. The scale and complexity of this manufacturing program required significant expansion of existing facilities and the development of entirely new production techniques that had never been attempted in previous human enhancement projects. The first of these new models to emerge from the development process was designated the Bouncer a close combat specialist whose design reflected the brutal realities of protection work in Rapture's deteriorating social environment. The Bouncer's most distinctive feature was the massive drill that had been integrated with its right arm, replacing the natural limb with a weapon system that could serve both offensive and defensive functions, while also providing the enhanced Guardian with capabilities that exceeded anything that conventional weapons could offer in the Bakra, confined spaces where most protection scenarios were likely to unfold. The conceptual foundation for the Bouncer design was based on extensive analysis of combat scenarios that had been observed during Alpha Series deployments, identifying patterns of threat and response that revealed the tactical requirements for effective protection in Rapture's unique urban environment. The data collected from these observations indicated that most threats to Little Sisters occurred in close quarters where mobility was limited and where the Protector's ability to engage enemies at short range was more important than long-distance combat capabilities. The drill arm integration that defined the Bouncer model required surgical procedures that were even more extensive than those used for previous Protector generations, as the replacement of an entire limb with a mechanical weapon system demanded advances in nerve integration and motor control that pushed the boundaries of existing biomedical engineering knowledge. The connection between the subject's nervous system and the drill mechanism had to be seamless and intuitive, allowing the enhanced Guardian to control the weapon with the same precision and natural responsiveness that characterized normal limb function, while also providing the power and reliability necessary for effective combat operations. The surgical team that developed the drill arm integration procedures included some of Rapture's most skilled biomedical engineers and neurosurgeons, whose expertise in human anatomy and mechanical systems enabled them to create connections between biological and artificial components that were more sophisticated and reliable than anything that had been achieved in previous enhancement programs. The complexity of these procedures required months of preparation and testing with cadavers and laboratory animals before the techniques could be safely applied to human subjects. The mechanical components that comprised the drill arm system were manufactured using advanced alloys and precision engineering techniques that ensured the weapon would remain functional under the extreme conditions that Protectors encountered during their duties. The drill mechanism incorporated self-maintenance capabilities and redundant systems that could continue to operate even when primary components were damaged, while the integration with the Protector's biological systems provided feedback mechanisms that enabled precise control and prevented accidental injury to the Guardian or nearby civilians. The atmospheric diving suit that enclosed the Bouncer's modified body was designed as an integral part of the Protector's physiology, rather than simply protective equipment, incorporating advanced life support systems and armor plating that could withstand the most severe combat conditions, while also providing the mobility and sensory capabilities necessary for effective Guardian work. The suit's heavy construction reflected the understanding that Bouncers would be operating in hostile environments, where they might face multiple attackers using advanced weapons and tactics specifically designed to neutralize enhanced Protectors. The armor plating that protected the Bouncer's vital systems was manufactured using materials that had been developed specifically for the Protector program, incorporating lessons learned from military applications, while also adapting to the unique requirements of underwater operations and the corrosive environment that characterized much of Rapture's infrastructure. The armor's design balanced protection against various forms of attack with the need to maintain mobility and flexibility that were essential for effective combat operations in confined spaces. The life support systems that maintained the Bouncer's biological functions were more sophisticated than those used in previous Protector models, incorporating advances in atmospheric processing, waste management, and nutritional support that enabled the enhanced guardians to operate for extended periods without requiring external maintenance or resupply. These systems were designed to function automatically and reliably, reducing the cognitive burden on the protector while ensuring that basic physiological needs were met regardless of operational conditions. The helmet design that protected the bouncer's head was both functional and psychologically intimidating, featuring 8 porthole windows that provided enhanced visual capabilities, while also creating an appearance that was deliberately inhuman and threatening to potential opponents. The helmeted appearance served multiple purposes, protecting the protector's modified sensory organs, while also creating a visual barrier that separated the enhanced guardian from normal human social interaction, and reinforced their role as specialized security assets rather than conventional citizens or workers. The sensory enhancements that were incorporated into the bouncer's helmet systems included improved visual acuity, enhanced peripheral vision, and specialized filters that enabled effective operation in low-light conditions and underwater environments. These enhancements were integrated with targeting systems that could assist the protector in accurately directing their drill weapon, while also providing environmental awareness that enhanced their ability to detect and respond to potential threats against their charges. The tactical doctrine that governed bouncer deployment emphasized close quarters combat and area denial, recognizing that these protectors would be most effective when they could use their massive size and drill weapon to control access to their little sister charges, while deterring attackers through the obvious threat of devastating retaliation. The bouncer's combat style was designed to be overwhelmingly aggressive and visually spectacular, creating psychological effects that would discourage potential threats, while also providing practical advantages in the cramped corridors and chambers that characterized much of Rapture's interior architecture. The training programs that prepared bouncer protectors for their duties combined physical conditioning with tactical instruction and psychological reinforcement, designed to optimize their effectiveness while maintaining the artificial, emotional bonds that motivated their protective behavior. These programs were more extensive than those used for previous protector generations, reflecting the increased complexity of their operational environment and the sophisticated threats they would be expected to counter. The manufacturing process that produced the bouncer models required extensive coordination between Rapture's most advanced industrial facilities and research laboratories, as the integration of biological modification with mechanical engineering demanded precision and quality control standards that exceeded anything that had been attempted in the city's previous manufacturing programs. The production of each bouncer required months of careful work by specialized teams whose expertise in human enhancement and advanced materials science represented some of the most sophisticated technical capabilities available anywhere in the world. The quality control procedures that ensured each bouncer met operational standards involved extensive testing of both biological and mechanical systems, including stress testing of the drill arm mechanism, verification of life support system performance, and psychological evaluation of the artificial bonding protocols that connected the protector to their assigned charges. These procedures were designed to identify potential problems before deployment, while also providing data that could be used to improve future production runs. The second major protector model to emerge from this development phase was the Rosie, designed as a ranged combat specialist, whose capabilities complemented those of the bouncer, while addressing tactical situations that required different approaches to protection and threat neutralization. Where the bouncer was optimized for close quarters dominance and psychological intimidation, the Rosie was designed for precision engagement and tactical flexibility, equipped with weapon systems that could address threats at various ranges, while maintaining the mobility necessary for effective protection of multiple little sister charges. The conceptual foundation for the Rosie design was based on recognition that many protection scenarios would require engagement of threats at distances where the bouncer's drill weapon would be ineffective, while also acknowledging that the varied environments where Little Sisters conducted their ADAM collection activities would require protectors who could adapt their tactics to different terrain and architectural conditions. The Rosie was designed to excel in situations where precision and tactical flexibility were more important than overwhelming force and intimidation. The signature weapon system that defined the Rosie model was the rivet gun, a pneumatically powered projectile weapon that could fire heavy metal rivets with devastating accuracy and stopping power, while also serving as an effective tool for breaching barriers and creating tactical advantages in complex combat situations. The rivet gun's design reflected lessons learned from industrial applications in Rapture's construction and maintenance industries, adapted for combat use through modifications that enhanced its rate of fire, accuracy, and ammunition capacity, while maintaining the reliability and simplicity that made it effective in the hands of enhanced operators with limited tactical training. The engineering challenges involved in adapting industrial rivet guns for combat use required significant modifications to the weapon's firing mechanism, ammunition feed system, and targeting apparatus, while also ensuring that the weapon could be effectively integrated with the Rosie's modified anatomy and neural control systems. The resulting weapon system was capable of firing projectiles with sufficient force to penetrate advanced armor, while maintaining accuracy at ranges that exceeded the effective engagement distance of most small arms that might be used against the protectors. The rivet gun's dual nature as both weapon and tool provided Rosie protectors with capabilities that extended beyond simple combat effectiveness, allowing them to modify their environment during protection operations by creating or removing barriers, opening alternative routes for their charges, and establishing defensive positions that could enhance their tactical advantages. This versatility made the Rosie model particularly valuable in the complex urban environment of Rapture, where protection scenarios often required adaptation to rapidly changing circumstances and creative solutions to tactical challenges. The ammunition supply system that supported the rivet gun was designed to provide the protector with sufficient firepower for extended engagements, while also incorporating manufacturing capabilities that could produce additional ammunition from available materials when necessary. This system included automated loading mechanisms that could operate without conscious control from the protector, enabling sustained fire during combat operations, while freeing the Guardian's attention for other aspects of threat assessment and charge protection. The proximity mines that supplemented the Rosie's primary weapon system represented an innovation in defensive technology that reflected the increasing sophistication of the threats that protectors were expected to face as Rapture's social fabric continued to deteriorate. These mines could be deployed rapidly to create defensive perimeters around Little Sister charges, providing automated threat detection and neutralization capabilities that enhanced the protector's ability to manage multiple simultaneous dangers while maintaining focus on primary protection responsibilities. The mine deployment system was integrated with the Rosie's tactical assessment capabilities, enabling the protector to automatically position defensive devices in optimal locations based on environmental analysis and threat prediction algorithms that had been developed through extensive study of combat scenarios and enemy behavior patterns. This automation reduced the cognitive burden on the protector while ensuring that defensive measures were deployed effectively and efficiently during high-stress combat situations. The atmospheric diving suit that enclosed the Rosie protectors incorporated design elements that reflected their role as ranged combat specialists, providing enhanced stability and accuracy during weapon deployment. while also maintaining the mobility and protection characteristics that were essential for all Protector operations. The suit's construction balanced armor protection with tactical flexibility, recognizing that Rosie Protectors would need to move quickly between firing positions while also being able to withstand return fire from opponents who might have access to military-grade weapons. The visual design of both Bouncer and Rosie models was deliberately crafted to create psychological effects that would enhance their effectiveness while also reinforcing their role as guardians rather than mere weapons or tools. The imposing size and mechanical appearance of these Protectors was intended to inspire both respect and fear, while their obvious dedication to protecting the Little Sisters was designed to create positive associations among Rapture's general population who would encounter them during routine activities throughout the city. The aesthetic elements that distinguished the Protector designs incorporated motifs and styling that reflected Rapture's Art Deco architectural tradition, creating visual connections between the enhanced Guardians and the cultural identity of the underwater city, while also emphasizing their role as products of advanced civilization rather than crude military weapons. This attention to visual design reflected the understanding that the Protector's appearance would influence public perception and acceptance of the enhancement program. The deployment of the first Bouncer and Rosie Protectors into Rapture's public spaces marked a fundamental transformation in the city's social landscape, as the presence of these massive, heavily armed Guardians created an atmosphere of security and order that had been increasingly absent from daily life as criminal activity and social disorder had escalated throughout the urban environment. The sight of these Protectors moving through the city's elegant corridors with their little sister charges became a symbol of Rapture's technological achievement and its ability to solve complex social problems through scientific innovation and careful engineering. The logistical challenges involved in deploying Protectors throughout Rapture's extensive urban environment required careful coordination between security forces, administrative personnel, and the technical specialists who maintain the enhanced Guardian's complex systems. The deployment protocols that were developed for this purpose established patrol routes, maintenance schedules, and communication procedures that ensured effective coverage of critical areas, while also providing support for Protectors who might encounter unusual or challenging situations during their duties. The public reaction to the deployment of Bouncer and Rosie Protectors was complex and varied, reflecting the diverse perspectives and concerns of Rapture's citizenry as they encountered these enhanced Guardians in their daily lives. Many citizens appreciated the increased security and order that the Protectors provided, recognizing that their presence made the city safer for everyone, while also demonstrating the advanced capabilities that set Rapture apart from surface world societies that lacked access to such sophisticated human enhancement technologies. The positive responses to Protector deployment were particularly strong among business owners and residents of areas that had experienced high levels of criminal activity, as the enhanced Guardian's presence provided tangible improvements in safety and security that translated into economic benefits and enhanced quality of life. The Protector's effectiveness in deterring crime and maintaining order created conditions that supported business growth and residential development in areas that had previously been considered too dangerous for investment, habitation. But the public response also included concerns and criticisms that reflected deeper anxieties about the implications of widespread deployment of enhanced human beings, whose capabilities and loyalties were controlled by technological systems rather than conventional social institutions. Some citizens worried about the long-term consequences of creating a society where security depended on artificial beings rather than community cooperation and social responsibility, while others questioned the ethics of using enhanced humans as security assets regardless of their effectiveness. Andrew Ryan's public relations campaign that introduced the new protectors to Rapture's population emphasized their role as knights in shining armor who had been created to protect the city's most valuable citizens and resources against the parasitic elements that sought to undermine the prosperity and security that characterized life in the underwater metropolis. This campaign was designed to create positive associations with the protectors, while also reinforcing the ideological framework that justified their existence and the extensive resources that had been devoted to their development and deployment. The knightly metaphor that framed public understanding of the protectors drew upon historical and cultural references that resonated with Rapture's educated population, creating associations with noble traditions of service and protection, while also emphasizing the voluntary nature of the transformation process that had created these enhanced guardians. The knightly metaphor served to dignify the protector's role while also providing a framework for understanding their relationship to the society they served, that went beyond simple utilitarian calculations about security and economic efficiency. The propaganda materials that supported Ryan's campaign included artistic representations of the protectors that emphasized their protective function and noble purpose, while downplaying the more disturbing aspects of their artificial nature and the circumstances that had made their creation necessary. These materials portrayed the protectors as heroic figures whose sacrifice and dedication exemplified the highest ideals of Rapture's civilization, while also suggesting that their presence demonstrated the city's technological and moral superiority over surface world societies. The reality of daily life, with protectors patrolling Rapture's public spaces, proved to be more complex and challenging than the optimistic vision presented in Ryan's propaganda campaigns, as the presence of these massive, heavily armed guardians created new forms of social tension and anxiety, even as they provided the security benefits that had been promised. The protectors' obvious artificial nature and their single-minded focus on protecting their little sister charges sometimes made them seem more like sophisticated machines than enhanced human beings, creating an uncanny valley effect that disturbed many citizens. Despite their intellectual appreciation for the technological achievement they represented, the acoustic environment created by protector operations became one of the most noticeable aspects of their presence in Rapture's daily life, as the heavy footsteps of their armored suits created vibrations that could be felt throughout the city's structure, while their mechanical breathing apparatus produced distinctive sounds that became associated with security and protection in the minds of citizens who regularly encountered them. The whale-like vocalizations that protectors used for communication added another layer to this soundscape, creating an alien quality that reinforced the sense that these beings existed in a category that was neither fully human nor entirely mechanical. The success of the Bouncer and Rosie models in providing effective protection for little sisters throughout Rapture's public spaces had validated the multi-charge bonding approach, while also revealing new challenges that emerged as the underwater city's social and political situation continued to deteriorate beyond the scope of problems that standard protector deployments could adequately address. The increasing sophistication of criminal organizations and the growing desperation of ADAM-addicted splicers created threats that required more advanced protective capabilities than the existing Guardian models could provide, leading to demands for enhanced versions of proven designs and entirely new approaches to protector development. The criminal elements that operated in Rapture's shadows had initially been caught off guard by the deployment of Big Daddy protectors, finding themselves unable to overcome the enhanced Guardian's superior strength, armor protection, and single-minded dedication to protecting their charges. But as months passed and criminal organizations had opportunities to study the protectors' capabilities and limitations, they began developing tactics and weapons specifically designed to neutralize or circumvent the enhanced Guardians, creating an arms race between criminal innovation and protector technology that would drive continued advancement in both offensive and defensive capabilities. The evolution of criminal tactics in response to protector deployment represented a form of technological natural selection that forced continuous innovation in both the methods used by those who sought to exploit Little Sisters and the defensive capabilities of those who protected them. Criminal organizations began recruiting former military personnel and industrial workers who possessed the technical knowledge necessary to identify vulnerabilities in protector systems, while also investing in black market weapons and equipment that could provide advantages in confrontations with the enhanced Guardians. The most sophisticated criminal organizations began developing specialized teams whose sole purpose was to neutralize Big Daddy protectors, using combinations of explosives, armor-piercing weapons, and coordinated tactics that exploited the protectors' predictable behavioral patterns and their vulnerability to attacks that threatened their charges rather than themselves. These anti-protector teams represented a new category of criminal specialist that reflected the changing nature of criminal activity in a society where the most valuable resources were protected by enhanced human beings rather than conventional security measures. The intelligence reports that documented these evolving criminal capabilities revealed patterns of adaptation and innovation that alarmed Rapture's security officials, who recognized that the standard Bouncer and Rosie models might soon be inadequate for protecting Little Sisters against increasingly sophisticated and well-equipped opponents. The escalation of criminal capabilities created pressure for corresponding improvements in protector technology, leading to demands for enhanced versions of existing models and research into entirely new approaches to Guardian development. The areas of Rapture that posed the greatest challenges for standard protector operations were those where architectural complexity, environmental hazards, or concentrated criminal activity created conditions that exceeded the tactical capabilities of Bouncer and Rosie Guardians, who had been optimized for operations in the city's main public spaces and commercial districts. These dangerous zones included the industrial sectors where heavy machinery and toxic materials created additional hazards, the residential areas where cramped quarters limited mobility and created ambush opportunities, and the abandoned sections where lack of maintenance had created structural instability and environmental dangers that complicated protection operations. The industrial districts presented particularly challenging operational environments for protectors, as the presence of heavy machinery, chemical processing equipment, and toxic materials created hazards that could be exploited by enemies who understood the dangers better than the enhanced Guardians did. The criminals who operated in these areas often possessed technical knowledge about industrial processes that enabled them to create traps and ambush scenarios that took advantage of the protector's unfamiliarity with specialized equipment and chemical hazards. The residential areas of Rapture created different but equally significant challenges for protector operations, as the narrow corridors and multi-level architecture provided numerous opportunities for ambush attacks, while limiting the protector's ability to maneuver effectively or use their superior size and strength to maximum advantage. The complex layout of residential buildings also made it difficult for protectors to maintain visual contact with their charges while navigating through areas where enemies could attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The abandoned sections of Rapture represented perhaps the most dangerous operational environment for protectors, as years of neglect and structural decay had created conditions where floors could collapse without warning, water pressure could breach walls at any moment, and electrical systems could fail catastrophically during combat operations. The unpredictable nature of these environmental hazards made it difficult for protectors to assess risks accurately, while also providing enemies with opportunities to use structural instability as a weapon against the enhanced Guardians. The development of elite variants of the existing Bouncer and Rosie models represented the first response to these escalating threats, incorporating enhanced armor protection, improved weapon systems, and advanced sensory capabilities that would enable the upgraded protectors to operate effectively in environments where standard models had proven vulnerable or inadequate. These elite protectors retained the basic design philosophy and tactical doctrine of their standard counterparts, while adding specialized capabilities that reflected lessons learned from actual combat operations and analysis of the evolving threat environment. The research and development process that produced the elite variants required extensive analysis of combat data collected from standard protector deployments, identifying specific failure modes and vulnerability patterns that could be addressed through targeted improvements in design and capability. This analysis revealed that many protector failures occurred not due to inadequate firepower or protection, but rather because of limitations in sensory capabilities, tactical awareness, and adaptability to unexpected situations. The Elite Bouncer variant incorporated several significant improvements over the standard model, most notably the replacement of the traditional drill weapon with a spinning harpoon launcher that provided both close combat effectiveness and limited ranged capabilities while maintaining the psychological intimidation factor that made the drill such an effective deterrent. The harpoon system could fire barbed projectiles that could penetrate advanced armor, while also serving as a grappling mechanism that enabled the Elite Bouncer to control enemy movement and positioning during combat operations. The harpoon weapon system that defined the Elite Bouncer represented a significant advancement in protector armament technology, incorporating lessons learned from both industrial applications and military weapons development to create a versatile tool that could serve multiple tactical functions. The weapon's design enabled it to fire projectiles with sufficient force to penetrate barriers and armor, while also providing the capability to retrieve or manipulate objects at distance, greatly expanding the Elite Bouncer's tactical options during combat operations. The manufacturing requirements for the harpoon system were substantially more complex than those for the standard drill weapon, requiring precision engineering and advanced materials that could withstand the stresses associated with both projectile firing and cable retrieval operations. The weapon's integration with the Elite Bouncer's enhanced nervous system required surgical procedures that were more extensive than those used for standard models, creating stronger connections between the protector's consciousness and the weapon's targeting and control systems. The Elite Rosie variant featured enhanced rivet gun systems with improved rate of fire and ammunition capacity, along with advanced targeting systems that increased accuracy and effectiveness at longer ranges. These improvements were complemented by upgraded proximity mine systems that could be configured for different threat profiles and tactical situations, providing Elite Rosie protectors with more flexibility in establishing defensive perimeters and responding to complex attack scenarios that involved multiple opponents with varying capabilities and approaches. The targeting systems that distinguished Elite Rosie protectors from their standard counterparts incorporated advanced computational capabilities that could analyze multiple threats simultaneously while providing trajectory calculations and firing solutions that maximized the probability of successful engagement. These systems were integrated with the protector's enhanced sensory apparatus to create a comprehensive threat assessment and response capability that exceeded anything that had been achieved in previous protector models. The proximity mine upgrades that accompanied the Elite Rosie's other improvements included enhanced detection systems that could distinguish between threats and non-combatants more effectively than standard mines, reducing the risk of collateral damage while maintaining defensive effectiveness. The mines could also be programmed with different activation parameters that enabled tactical flexibility in various operational scenarios. from crowd control to area denial to targeted elimination of specific threats. The manufacturing requirements for these elite variants were substantially more complex and expensive than those for standard protectors, requiring advanced materials and precision engineering that pushed the limits of Rapture's industrial capabilities, while also demanding significantly more time and resources for each completed unit. The economic analysis of elite protector production revealed that while the enhanced capabilities justified the additional costs in high-threat environments, the resource requirements made large-scale deployment impractical, given the other demands on Rapture's manufacturing capacity and financial resources. The cost-benefit analysis that supported elite protector development revealed that the enhanced capabilities provided by these variants could be economically justified only in situations where the value of the assets being protected exceeded the additional investment required for the upgraded Guardians. This analysis led to a hierarchical deployment strategy that concentrated elite protectors in the most dangerous areas and assigned them to protect the most valuable little sisters, while standard models continued to provide security in less challenging environments. The deployment of elite protectors was therefore limited to the most dangerous areas of Rapture and the most valuable little sisters, creating a hierarchical protection system that reflected both practical constraints and the economic realities that governed resource allocation in Andrew Ryan's increasingly stratified society. The elite protectors became symbols of advanced technological capability, while also reinforcing social inequalities that determined access to the highest levels of protection and security. The social implications of this hierarchical protection system created new forms of inequality and resentment within Rapture's population, as citizens recognized that access to the most advanced security measures was determined primarily by economic value rather than personal need or social contribution. The visible presence of elite protectors in some areas, but not others, served as a constant reminder of the disparities that characterized life in the underwater city, contributing to the social tensions that would eventually contribute to the outbreak of civil conflict. But even as elite variants of existing protector models were being deployed to address immediate security concerns, Rapture's scientific community was working on far more ambitious projects that would represent fundamental advances in protector technology rather than incremental improvements to proven designs. The most significant of these projects was the development of an entirely new class of protector that would incorporate artificial intelligence systems and advanced automation capabilities that had never been attempted in previous human enhancement programs. The theoretical foundation for advanced protector development was based on recognition that the increasing complexity of threats and operational environments would eventually exceed the capabilities of protectors whose responses were based primarily on conditioned behaviors and instinctual reactions. The development of true artificial intelligence that could work in partnership with enhanced human consciousness promised to create protectors who could adapt to novel situations and develop tactical innovations that would maintain their effectiveness even against opponents who understood their capabilities and limitations. The Rapture Central Computing Facility that served as the technological heart of the underwater city's information processing and communication systems became the focal point for this advanced protector development program, as the facility's massive computational resources and sophisticated artificial intelligence research capabilities made it the ideal location for creating protectors that could operate with greater autonomy and tactical sophistication than any previous model. The collaboration between the Central Computing Facility and the Protector Development Program represented a convergence of Rapture's most advanced technological capabilities in pursuit of creating Guardians that would represent the pinnacle of human-machine integration. The central computing facility's involvement in Protector development marked a significant expansion of its role within Rapture's technological infrastructure, as the facility's primary functions had previously focused on managing the city's automated systems and information networks, rather than developing new forms of enhanced human beings. The facility's transition to Protector development required significant reorganization of its resources and personnel, while also necessitating the development of new research methodologies that could effectively combine artificial intelligence development with biological enhancement techniques. The Thinker, the artificial intelligence system that managed much of Rapture's automated infrastructure and served as the central computing facility's primary decision-making entity, was directly involved in the design and development of this new Protector model, contributing computational analysis and design optimization that exceeded anything that human engineers could achieve working independently. The Thinker's involvement in the project ensured that the new Protectors would be fully integrated with Rapture's existing technological infrastructure, while also incorporating artificial intelligence capabilities that would make them more adaptable and effective than any previous Guardian model. The collaboration between human researchers and the Thinker represented a new form of scientific partnership that combined human creativity and intuition with artificial intelligence's computational power and analytical capabilities. This collaboration enabled the development of Protector designs that were more sophisticated and innovative than anything that could have been achieved through purely human or purely artificial intelligence approaches, while also establishing new methodologies for human-AI cooperation that would influence future research programs throughout Rapture. The Protector model that emerged from this collaboration was designated the Lancer, reflecting its role as the spearhead of advanced Protector technology and its intended function as a precision instrument for addressing the most challenging protection scenarios. The Lancer's design philosophy emphasized technological sophistication over brute force, incorporating advanced artificial intelligence systems, precision weapons, and aesthetic elements that reflected the Art Deco styling that characterized Rapture's architectural and cultural identity. The visual design of the Lancer represented a significant departure from the utilitarian appearance of previous Protector models, incorporating decorative elements and aesthetic refinements that reflected Rapture's cultural sophistication, while also serving functional purposes related to the Protector's advanced capabilities. The Lancer's appearance was intended to inspire confidence and admiration rather than fear and intimidation, reflecting a more mature understanding of the Protector's role in Rapture's society and their relationship with the citizens they served. The visual appearance of the Lancer was dramatically different from that of previous Protector models, featuring elegant lines and decorative elements that drew inspiration from medieval knighthood, while incorporating the geometric patterns and luxurious materials that defined Rapture's distinctive aesthetic sensibility. The Lancer's armor was taller and more slender than that of Bouncer or Rosy Protectors, creating a more graceful silhouette that suggested sophistication and refinement, while maintaining the intimidating presence that was essential for effective protection operations. The Art Deco styling that characterized the Lancer's design reflected the influence of Rapture's architectural and cultural traditions on the development of advanced Protector technology, creating visual connections between the enhanced Guardians and the broader aesthetic framework that defined the underwater city's identity. This attention to aesthetic detail demonstrated the maturation of Protector development as both a technological and cultural achievement, reflecting the understanding that these enhanced beings were not merely functional tools, but also expressions of Rapture's technological and artistic capabilities. The manufacturing techniques required to create the Lancer's sophisticated armor and decorative elements represented significant advances in precision metalworking and materials science, incorporating artistic craftsmanship with advanced engineering to create protectors that were both functional and beautiful. The integration of aesthetic and functional elements required close collaboration between artists, engineers, and craftsmen, whose combined skills produced protectors that embodied the highest achievements of both technological and artistic innovation. The primary weapon system that defined the Lancer's combat capabilities was an ion laser that represented one of the most advanced energy weapons ever developed in Rapture's research facilities, capable of delivering precisely targeted high-energy beams that could penetrate virtually any armor or barrier, while also providing non-lethal options for crowd control and area denial. The laser system's power requirements and technical complexity made it impractical for use with conventional protector models, but the Lancer's advanced power generation and control systems enabled effective deployment of this revolutionary weapon technology. The development of the ion laser weapon system required breakthroughs in multiple areas of physics and engineering, including power generation, beam focusing, thermal management, and targeting systems that could deliver precise energy bursts under various operational conditions. The weapon's integration with the Lancer's artificial intelligence systems enabled autonomous targeting and fire control that could engage multiple threats simultaneously while minimizing the risk of collateral damage to protected charges or innocent bystanders. The power generation systems that supported the ion laser represented significant advances in portable energy technology, incorporating miniaturized fusion reactors and advanced battery systems that could provide the enormous amounts of energy required for effective weapon operation. These power systems were integrated with the Lancer's life support apparatus to create comprehensive energy management that could sustain both biological and mechanical functions during extended operational periods. The artificial intelligence systems that governed the Lancer's behavior and decision-making processes were far more sophisticated than the conditioning protocols that had been used for previous protector generations, incorporating machine learning capabilities that enabled continuous improvement in tactical effectiveness and adaptive responses to novel situations and threats. These AI systems were designed to work in harmony with the human consciousness that remained at the core of the Lancer's identity, creating a hybrid intelligence that combined human intuition and creativity with mechanical precision and computational power. The integration of advanced AI systems with human consciousness required surgical procedures that were even more extensive and complex than those used for previous protector models, involving the implantation of sophisticated computer interfaces directly into the subject's brain tissue, while maintaining the biological systems that supported human cognition and emotional responses. The success of these procedures required advances in neurosurgical techniques and biocompatible computer technology that represented significant breakthroughs in the fields of human-machine integration and artificial intelligence. Research, the development and testing of the Lancer prototype required the construction of specialized facilities within the central computing complex that could provide the controlled environment necessary for advanced AI research, human-machine integration experiments. These facilities incorporated the most sophisticated monitoring and control systems available in Rapture, while also providing the security measures necessary to prevent unauthorized access to potentially dangerous experimental technology. The completion of the first functional Lancer prototype was hailed as one of the greatest technological achievements in Rapture's history, demonstrating that human consciousness could be successfully integrated with advanced artificial intelligence systems while maintaining the emotional authenticity and protective instincts that made Big Daddy Guardians effective. The prototype's performance in controlled testing scenarios exceeded all expectations, showing capabilities that far surpassed those of any previous Protector model, while maintaining the reliability and safety characteristics that were essential for deployment in populated areas. But the triumph of the Lancer project was destined to remain unrealized, as the very success of the Advanced Protector program had attracted the attention of individuals whose personal grievances and psychological instabilities would prove more destructive than any external threat that the Lancers had been designed to address. Redball, an engineer whose expertise in Rapture's infrastructure systems had made him invaluable for the central computing facility's operations, had become increasingly unstable due to prolonged ADAM exposure and growing resentment over his treatment by the facility's management. The tragedy that befell the Lancer project would serve as a devastating reminder that even the most advanced technological achievements could be vulnerable to human failings, and that the greatest threats to progress often came not from external enemies, but from the psychological instabilities and moral failures of those who possessed the knowledge and access necessary to destroy what they could not control or possess. The loss of the Lancer project and the sealing of the central computing facility marked the end of Rapture's golden age of technological innovation, coinciding with the emergence of social and political tensions that would soon explode into open conflict and fundamentally alter the role that Big Daddy Protectors played in the underwater city's increasingly chaotic environment. The civil war that erupted between Andrew Ryan's authoritarian government and the growing resistance movement led by Atlas represented more than just a political struggle. It was a fundamental breakdown of the social contract that had enabled Rapture's citizens to coexist peacefully despite their diverse backgrounds and competing interests. The ideological foundations of the conflict traced back to the fundamental contradictions inherent in Andrew Ryan's vision of Rapture as a utopia built on individualistic principles while simultaneously requiring collective cooperation and shared sacrifice to maintain the complex infrastructure and social systems that made life possible in the hostile environment of the deep ocean. The tension between individual freedom and collective necessity had been manageable during the city's early years of prosperity and growth, but the increasing scarcity of resources and the growing influence of ADAM addiction had created conditions where these contradictions could no longer be ignored or resolved through compromise. The charismatic figure who emerged to challenge Ryan's authority called himself Atlas, though his true identity and motivations would remain hidden behind layers of deception and manipulation that reflected the moral complexity that had come to characterize life in Rapture's declining years. Atlas's message resonated with citizens who had been excluded from the prosperity that ADAM had brought to the city's elite, promising a more equitable distribution of resources and opportunities, while also appealing to growing frustrations with Ryan's increasingly authoritarian response to the city's mounting problems. The propaganda war that preceded and accompanied the violent conflict saw both sides attempting to claim the loyalty and support of the Big Daddy Protectors, recognizing that these enhanced guardians represented a significant military asset whose allegiance could potentially determine the outcome of the struggle for control of Rapture. The artificial nature of the Protectors' conditioning made them theoretically neutral in political conflicts, but the practical realities of their deployment and maintenance meant that they were inevitably influenced by the broader social and economic forces that shaped the city's development. The Big Daddy Protectors found themselves caught in an impossible situation as the civil war intensified, as their conditioning to protect little sisters and maintain order conflicted with the reality of a society where order itself had become a matter of violent dispute, and where the very definition of protection required choices between competing factions that claimed to represent the city's legitimate interests. The artificial emotional bonds that connected the protectors to their charges remained as strong as ever, but the social context that had given meaning to those bonds was rapidly disintegrating around them. The conditioning protocols that governed Big Daddy behavior had been designed for a stable society where threats to little sisters came primarily from criminal elements and individual splicers, rather than organized military forces engaged in systematic warfare. The protectors' programming emphasized the protection of their specific charges while avoiding involvement in broader political or social conflicts. But this approach became increasingly untenable as the distinction between criminal activity and legitimate resistance became impossible to maintain. The initial phases of the Civil War saw Big Daddies attempting to maintain their protective functions while avoiding involvement in the broader political conflict, following their conditioning to focus exclusively on threats to their little sisters, while ignoring the larger social and political forces that were reshaping Rapture's landscape. This approach proved increasingly untenable as the violence escalated and the distinction between criminal activity and political resistance became impossible to maintain, forcing the protectors to make tactical decisions that inevitably aligned them with one faction or another, regardless of their intended neutrality. The military strategists on both sides of the conflict quickly recognized that the Big Daddy protectors represented both valuable assets and significant obstacles to their operational objectives, leading to the development of specialized tactics and equipment designed either to neutralize the enhanced Guardians or to exploit their predictable behavioral patterns for tactical advantage. The Protectors' single-minded focus on protecting their charges made them vulnerable to manipulation by forces that understood how to threaten little sisters in ways that would compel the Guardians to act in accordance with military objectives rather than their intended protective mission. The transformation of Rapture's elegant public spaces into battlegrounds posed unprecedented challenges for Big Daddy protectors, whose tactical training had prepared them for dealing with individual criminals and small groups of desperate splicers, rather than organized military forces equipped with advanced weapons and coordinated battle plans. The urban warfare that consumed the city's corridors and chambers required adaptation to new forms of combat that emphasized mobility and tactical flexibility over the area, denial and psychological intimidation tactics that had proven effective against conventional threats. The architectural features that had made Rapture's public spaces so impressive during peacetime became tactical obstacles during the Civil War, as the open atriums, grand staircases, and soaring galleries that had showcased the city's artistic achievements provided numerous opportunities for ambush attacks, while limiting the Protectors' ability to establish effective defensive perimeters around their charges. The decorative elements and artistic installations that had once symbolized Rapture's cultural sophistication became potential weapons and hiding places for combatants who understood how to use the environment to their tactical advantage. The flooding that began to affect various sections of Rapture as the Civil War damaged critical infrastructure systems created additional challenges for Big Daddy protectors, whose atmospheric diving suits provided some protection against water intrusion, but whose mobility and effectiveness were significantly reduced in partially flooded environments. The Protectors' heavy armor and mechanical systems made them vulnerable to electrical hazards created by damaged power systems, while the presence of standing water complicated their ability to use certain weapons and tactics that had been effective in dry conditions. The Protectors' massive size and distinctive appearance, which had been advantages in deterring criminal activity and maintaining order in peacetime, became liabilities in a combat environment where stealth and tactical surprise were often more valuable than brute force and intimidation. The heavy footsteps and mechanical breathing that had once reassured ordinary citizens of their safety now served as early warning systems that alerted enemy combatants to the Protectors' approach, while their distinctive silhouettes made them priority targets for military forces on both sides of the conflict. The distinctive sounds produced by Big Daddy Protectors during movement and operation became significant tactical disadvantages during the Civil War, as their heavy footsteps could be heard through Rapture's metal floors and walls from considerable distances, while their mechanical breathing apparatus produced distinctive acoustic signatures that experienced combatants could use to track their movements and predict their positions. The whale-like vocalizations that Protectors used for communication were also vulnerable to interception and analysis by enemy forces, who could use this information to coordinate attacks or plan tactical movements. The weapons and tactics that were developed specifically for combating Big Daddy Protectors represented a new phase in Rapture's arms race, as both Ryan's security forces and Atlas's resistance fighters recognized that controlling or neutralizing the enhanced Guardians could provide significant tactical advantages in the struggle for control of the city's most valuable resources. The development of armor-piercing ammunition, explosive devices designed to exploit weaknesses in Protector suits, and tactical approaches that used the Protectors' protective instincts against them demonstrated the rapid evolution of military technology and strategy under the pressure of sustained conflict. The anti-Protector weapons that emerged during this period included specialized explosive devices designed to penetrate the heavy armor that protected the Guardians' vital systems, along with chemical agents that could interfere with their life support systems, and electrical weapons that could disrupt the complex electronic systems that controlled their mechanical components. The effectiveness of these weapons varied depending on the specific Protector model and the tactical situation, but their development represented a systematic effort to neutralize what had previously been considered an invulnerable asset. The tactical approaches that proved most effective against Big Daddy Protectors exploited their predictable behavioral patterns and their artificial emotional attachments to their charges, using threats to Little Sisters as a means of manipulating the Guardians' responses and forcing them to act in ways that served the attackers' objectives rather than their protective mission. These psychological warfare techniques represented a particularly cruel form of exploitation that used the Protectors' artificial love for their charges as a weapon against them. The psychological impact of the Civil War on Big Daddy Protectors was profound and complex, as their artificial emotional bonds to the Little Sisters created forms of stress and confusion that had not been anticipated by the scientists who had designed their conditioning protocols. The Protectors were witnessing the destruction of the society that had created them and given meaning to their existence, while simultaneously being required to continue their protective functions in an environment where traditional notions of safety and security had become meaningless. The conditioning protocols that maintained the artificial emotional bonds between Protectors and their charges had been designed for stable social conditions, where the definition of threats and the appropriate responses to them were relatively clear and consistent. The chaos and moral ambiguity of civil war created situations where these protocols provided conflicting guidance, forcing individual Protectors to make decisions that exceeded the scope of their original programming while potentially compromising their psychological stability and functional effectiveness. The stress responses exhibited by Big Daddy Protectors during the Civil War included increased aggression toward perceived threats, difficulty distinguishing between combatants and civilians, and episodes of apparent confusion or disorientation when their conditioning protocols provided contradictory guidance about appropriate responses to complex situations. These behavioral changes suggested that the artificial emotional bonds that motivated their protective behavior were more fragile and vulnerable to disruption than had been anticipated during their development. The breakdown of Rapture's infrastructure and support systems during the Civil War created new challenges for maintaining the Big Daddy protectors, as the specialized facilities and technical personnel required for their care and maintenance were diverted to more immediate military needs or destroyed in the fighting. The protectors' complex life support systems and mechanical components required regular servicing that became increasingly difficult to provide as the war consumed resources and disrupted the supply chains that supported their operation. The maintenance requirements that kept Big Daddy protectors functional included regular inspections and adjustments of their atmospheric systems, replacement of worn mechanical components, and periodic recalibration of their weapon systems and sensory apparatus. The technical expertise required for this maintenance was specialized and limited, making the protectors increasingly vulnerable to mechanical failures and system malfunctions as qualified technicians were reassigned to military duties or became casualties of the ongoing conflict. The supply chain disruptions that affected protector maintenance included shortages of specialized materials required for repairs and upgrades, along with difficulties in accessing manufacturing facilities that produced replacement components for their complex mechanical systems. The economic chaos created by the Civil War made it difficult to maintain the financial resources necessary to support protector operations, while the destruction of key infrastructure made it physically impossible to deliver supplies and services to protectors operating in contested areas of the city. The gradual isolation of individual Big Daddy Little Sister pairs reflected the broader fragmentation of Rapture's society, as the breakdown of central authority and the collapse of organized social institutions forced the enhanced guardians to operate independently in an environment where they could no longer rely on external support or coordination with other protectors. This isolation intensified the artificial emotional bonds between protectors and their charges, while also increasing their vulnerability to the various threats that proliferated throughout the war-torn city. The communication systems that had previously enabled coordination between different Big Daddy protectors and their supervisory personnel were disrupted by the Civil War, as radio networks were jammed or destroyed by military action while physical transportation routes were blocked by combat operations or structural damage. The resulting isolation forced individual protector charge pairs to develop survival strategies that relied entirely on their own resources and capabilities, creating a form of autonomous operation that had never been intended by the original program designers. The territorial behaviors that emerged among isolated Big Daddy protectors reflected their adaptation to the breakdown of organized society, as individual guardians began establishing and defending specific areas within Rapture that they claimed as exclusive domains for themselves and their charges. These territories provided some measure of security and predictability in an otherwise chaotic environment, while also creating new forms of conflict between protectors whose territories overlapped or whose resource needs brought them into competition with one another. The emergence of rogue Big Daddies during this period represented a new and disturbing development in the evolution of the Protector program, as some enhanced guardians whose little sisters had been killed or separated from them began exhibiting behaviors that deviated significantly from their original conditioning. These rogue protectors, freed from the artificial emotional attachments that had previously defined their purpose, became unpredictable and potentially dangerous elements in an already chaotic environment. The behavioral patterns exhibited by rogue protectors varied widely depending on their individual psychological makeup and the circumstances that had led to their separation from their charges. But common characteristics included increased aggression, territorial behavior, and apparent confusion about their role and purpose in a world where their original mission had become impossible to fulfill. Some rogue protectors attempted to continue their protective functions by adopting substitute charges from among Rapture's surviving children, while others became increasingly withdrawn and isolated, wandering aimlessly through the city's ruins without apparent purpose or direction. The most dangerous rogue protectors were those who had suffered complete psychological breakdown following the loss of their charges, as their artificial emotional attachments had been so fundamental to their identity and purpose that their removal created a form of existential crisis that manifested in unpredictable and potentially violent behavior. These individuals posed threats not only to enemy combatants, but also to innocent civilians and even other protectors who might be perceived as rivals or threats to their confused and damaged psyche. The death of Andrew Ryan and the subsequent collapse of organized government in Rapture created a power vacuum that various factions attempted to fill, but none possessed the resources or authority necessary to maintain control over the Big Daddy protectors or to coordinate their activities in service of broader social or political goals. The protectors' continued operation in the absence of central authority demonstrated both their remarkable resilience and their fundamental dependence on the artificial social structures that had given meaning to their existence. The assassination of Ryan represented more than just the elimination of a political leader. It marked the symbolic end of the ideological framework that had justified the creation of Rapture and the human enhancement programs that had produced the Big Daddy protectors. The collapse of this ideological foundation created a crisis of meaning for the enhanced Guardians, who found themselves operating in a world where the original purposes that had motivated their creation were no longer relevant or meaningful. The power struggles that followed Ryan's death involved multiple factions, attempting to establish control over different aspects of Rapture's remaining infrastructure and population. But none of these groups possessed the technological expertise or institutional authority necessary to effectively manage the Big Daddy protectors or to adapt their programming to serve new political objectives. The result was a gradual drift toward autonomous operation by individual protectors who continued to follow their original conditioning in the absence of external guidance or supervision. The aging of the Little Sisters represented a crisis that the Protector program had never been designed to address, as the children who served as ADAM processors gradually matured beyond the physical and psychological characteristics that had made them effective in their specialized roles. The biological processes that enabled Little Sisters to extract and concentrate ADAM became less efficient as the girls grew older, while their psychological conditioning began to break down as natural adolescent development conflicted with the artificial behavioral patterns that had been imposed through their transformation. The maturation process that affected Little Sisters created complex challenges for their Big Daddy protectors, whose artificial emotional attachments had been calibrated for relationships with young children rather than adolescents or young adults whose changing needs and capabilities required different forms of care and protection. The conditioning protocols that governed protector behavior provided limited guidance for adapting to these changes, creating confusion and stress for Guardians who found themselves caring for charges whose behavior and needs no longer matched their programmed expectations. The physical changes that accompanied Little Sister maturation included alterations in their ADAM processing capabilities that made them less effective at their original function, while also changing their nutritional and medical needs in ways that the protectors were not equipped to address. The psychological changes were even more significant, as the girls began to recover memories and personality characteristics that had been suppressed during their initial conditioning, creating internal conflicts between their artificial programming and their emerging natural personalities. The transition from active ADAM collection to city maintenance duties represented a fundamental shift in the Big Daddy protector's role within Rapture's ecosystem, as the enhanced Guardians adapted their protective instincts and physical capabilities to the task of preserving the infrastructure that remained essential for the city's survival. The maintenance work required many of the same skills and capabilities that had made the protectors effective Guardians, including strength, endurance, and the ability to operate in dangerous environments, while also providing them with a sense of purpose that helped maintain their psychological stability. The infrastructure maintenance tasks that Big Daddy protectors assumed during this transition period included repairing damaged atmospheric systems, maintaining water pressure and filtration equipment, and ensuring the continued operation of power generation and distribution networks that kept the city habitable. These responsibilities required technical knowledge and problem-solving capabilities that went beyond their original programming, forcing the protectors to adapt and learn new skills while applying their enhanced physical capabilities to challenges that their creators had never anticipated. The psychological adaptation that enabled Big Daddy protectors to transition from guardian duties to maintenance work demonstrated the remarkable flexibility and resilience of their artificial consciousness, as they were able to find new purpose and meaning in activities that served the broader goal of preserving the environment where they and their charges could survive. This adaptation also revealed the extent to which their protective instincts extended beyond their immediate charges to encompass the larger community and infrastructure that supported life in Rapture. The creation of Big Sisters from the mature Little Sisters represented Dr. Gilbert Alexander's final major contribution to Rapture's human enhancement programs, as his research into the biological and psychological changes that occurred during the aging process led to the development of new transformation procedures that could adapt the girls' modified physiology for different roles within the city's evolving social structure. The Big Sister transformation preserved many of the enhanced capabilities that had made the girls effective ADAM processors, while adding new abilities that made them formidable hunters and gatherers in their own right. The Big Sister transformation process involved extensive surgical and genetic modifications that enhanced the subject's physical capabilities, while also installing specialized equipment that enabled them to operate effectively in the hostile environment outside Rapture's protective hull. The resulting beings were faster and more agile than Big Daddy protectors, while possessing enhanced sensory capabilities that made them effective at locating and capturing potential Little Sister candidates from surface populations. The role that Big Sisters played in maintaining Rapture's Little Sister population through surface raids and kidnapping operations represented a desperate attempt to sustain the ADAM economy that had become essential for the survival of the city's remaining inhabitants, while also demonstrating the complete breakdown of the moral constraints that had once limited the scope and methods of the human enhancement programs. The abduction of children from surface communities violated every principle of civilized behavior, but the exigencies of survival in a collapsing society had eroded the ethical frameworks that might have prevented such actions. The surface operations conducted by Big Sisters required them to travel to coastal communities and urban areas where they could locate suitable candidates for transformation into Little Sisters, using their enhanced physical capabilities and specialized equipment to overcome resistance from law enforcement and civilian populations who were unprepared to deal with such advanced and determined adversaries. These operations were conducted with military precision and ruthless efficiency, reflecting the desperate nature of Rapture's situation and the extent to which survival had become the only consideration that mattered to the city's remaining leadership. The psychological conditioning that prepared Big Sisters for these surface operations included suppression of empathy and moral constraints that might interfere with their ability to abduct children from their families, while also enhancing their focus and determination in pursuit of their assigned objectives. This conditioning represented the most extreme form of psychological manipulation ever attempted in Rapture's human enhancement programs, creating beings who were capable of actions that would have been unthinkable for normal human beings. The autonomous ecosystem that emerged from the interactions between Big Daddies, Big Sisters, and the remaining Little Sisters represented a form of social organization that had evolved beyond the original parameters of the Protector program, creating self-sustaining patterns of behavior and interaction that operated independently of human oversight or control. This ecosystem demonstrated the remarkable adaptability of the enhanced beings, while also highlighting the extent to which they had diverged from their original human origins. The relationships that developed within this autonomous ecosystem were complex and multifaceted, involving forms of cooperation, competition, and mutual dependence that reflected both the artificial nature of their origins and the genuine emotional bonds that had developed between the enhanced beings over years of shared experience. The Big Daddy Protectors served as the stable foundation of this ecosystem, providing security and maintenance services that enabled the other enhanced beings to focus on their specialized functions. The Big Sisters functioned as the ecosystem's interface with the outside world, conducting the surface operations that were necessary to maintain the Little Sister population, while also serving as scouts and gatherers who could locate resources and opportunities that might benefit the entire community. Their enhanced mobility and sensory capabilities made them effective at navigating the dangerous environment outside Rapture, while avoiding detection by surface authorities who might attempt to interfere with their operations. The Rumbler variant that Dr. Alexander developed as his final innovation in Big Daddy technology represented an attempt to address the evolving threats and challenges that the Protectors faced in Rapture's post-war environment, incorporating lessons learned from years of combat experience, while also adapting to the resource constraints and manufacturing limitations that characterized the city's declining industrial capabilities. The Rumbler's emphasis on mobility and firepower over armor protection reflected the tactical realities of operating in an environment where stealth and adaptability were often more valuable than brute force resistance. The design philosophy that guided Rumbler development recognized that the post-war environment would require Protectors who could respond effectively to multiple, simultaneous threats while maintaining the mobility necessary to operate in damaged and unstable areas of the city. The Rumbler's reduced armor protection was offset by enhanced defensive capabilities and improved tactical flexibility that enabled these Protectors to avoid or neutralize threats before they could inflict significant damage. The weapons systems that distinguished the Rumbler from earlier Protector models included shoulder-mounted rocket launchers that provided area effect capabilities for dealing with groups of enemies, along with deployable mini-turrets that could establish automated defensive positions while the Protector focused on other aspects of protection or maintenance duties. These systems reflected a philosophy of tactical flexibility that recognized the increasingly complex and unpredictable nature of the threats that Big Daddies would face in their post-war environment. The rocket launcher system that served as the Rumbler's primary weapon was designed to provide effective engagement capabilities against both individual high-value targets and groups of enemies that might attempt to overwhelm the Protector through coordinated attacks. The weapon's area effect capabilities made it particularly effective against splicers and other enemies who relied on numbers and unpredictable movement patterns to overcome the Protector's superior individual capabilities. The mini-turret deployment system enabled Rumbler Protectors to establish temporary defensive positions that could provide covering fire and area denial capabilities, while the Guardian attended to other duties or moved to different tactical positions. These automated defensive systems were particularly valuable in situations where the Protector needed to defend multiple locations simultaneously, or where the tactical situation required rapid repositioning in response to changing threats. The manufacturing process for Rumbler variants was adapted to work with the limited resources and degraded industrial infrastructure that remained available in post-war Rapture. incorporating salvaged materials and simplified production techniques that could be implemented without the sophisticated facilities and specialized personnel that had been required for earlier Protector models. This adaptation demonstrated the remarkable resilience and ingenuity of Rapture's remaining scientists and engineers, while also highlighting the extent to which the city's technological capabilities had been diminished by years of conflict and neglect. The resource constraints that affected Rumbler production required innovative approaches to materials usage and component design, as traditional manufacturing materials and processes were no longer available due to supply chain disruptions and facility damage. The engineers who developed the Rumbler variants had to rely on salvaged materials and improvised manufacturing techniques while maintaining the quality and reliability standards that were essential for effective Protector operation. The complete breakdown of Rapture's original social order created an environment where the Big Daddy Protectors became some of the few remaining elements of stability and continuity in a world that had otherwise succumbed to chaos and decay. Their continued operation represented both a testament to the effectiveness of their original design and conditioning, and a tragic reminder of the society that had created them but had ultimately failed to sustain the vision that had both brought them into existence. The social role that Big Daddy Protectors assumed in post-collapse Rapture went far beyond their original protective function, as they became the guardians not just of individual little sisters, but of the entire remaining community of enhanced beings and human survivors who depended on their strength and dedication for survival. This expanded role required them to make decisions and take actions that exceeded their original programming, while maintaining the essential characteristics that made them effective protectors. The moral authority that Big Daddy Protectors came to possess in post-collapse Rapture reflected their consistent demonstration of loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication to the welfare of others, qualities that had become rare and precious in a world where most human institutions had failed and most individuals had succumbed to selfishness and desperation. The Protectors' artificial nature paradoxically made them more reliable and trustworthy than most human survivors, creating a situation where artificial beings had become the moral foundation for what remained of civilized society. The sounds of Big Daddies moving through Rapture's empty corridors became one of the defining characteristics of the city's post-war atmosphere, as their heavy footsteps and mechanical breathing echoed through spaces that had once been filled with the voices and activities of a thriving community. The whale-like calls that the Protectors used for communication created an haunting soundscape that served as a constant reminder of the artificial beings who had outlasted their creators and continued to fulfill their programmed purposes long after those purposes had lost their original meaning. The acoustic environment created by Big Daddy operations became a form of urban poetry that captured the essential tragedy of Rapture's collapse, as the sounds of their continued devotion echoed through halls that had once witnessed humanity's greatest achievements and most profound failures. The rhythm of their footsteps marked time in a city where time had otherwise stopped, while their vocalizations served as a form of mechanical prayer that honored the memory of those who had created them and the dreams that had brought them into existence. The bioluminescent displays that indicated the Protectors' emotional and operational states continued to function as designed, casting colored light through the darkness of flooded corridors and abandoned chambers, while providing visual evidence of the continued presence of consciousness and purpose within the massive mechanical suits. The green, yellow, and red lights that flickered across their helmets represented the last visible signs of the sophisticated, psychological, and technological systems that had once made Rapture the most advanced civilization on Earth. The patrol routes that Big Daddies established through the ruins of Rapture created informal territories and zones of influence that provided some measure of order and predictability in an environment that had otherwise become completely anarchic, while their presence served as a deterrent to the most destructive forms of scavenging and vandalism that might have accelerated the city's physical decay. The Protectors' continued maintenance activities helped preserve critical infrastructure systems that remained necessary for the survival of any remaining inhabitants, while their protective instincts ensured that the few children who remained in the city received some measure of care and security. As the years passed and Rapture's population dwindled toward extinction, the Big Daddy Protectors became the city's most enduring legacy, continuing their eternal vigil long after the last human voices had fallen silent and the last lights had flickered out in the corridors of Andrew Ryan's once magnificent underwater paradise. Their continued existence served as both monument and warning, demonstrating humanity's capacity for creating beings capable of transcending their creator's limitations, while also serving as reminders of the moral and social responsibilities that accompany such extraordinary technological achievements. In the end, the Big Daddies represent perhaps the most profound expression of Rapture's central paradox, the transformation of human love into mechanical duty, of parental instinct into programmed response, of free will into perfect servitude. These gentle giants, who would kill without hesitation to protect their charges, embody both the highest aspirations of human civilization and its most disturbing perversions. Their wail-like songs echo through flooded corridors that once rang with the laughter of children and the animated conversations of brilliant minds, serving as haunting reminders of the artificial bonds that proved more enduring than the natural relationships they were designed to replace. Long after Andrew Ryan's ideological empire crumbled into the sea, long after the last splicer fell silent in abandoned chambers, the Big Daddies continue their eternal patrol through the ruins of paradise, their bioluminescent glow casting lonely shadows on walls that once witnessed humanity's greatest ambitions. They are monuments to devotion corrupted, to love transformed into bondage, to the terrible price of perfection, pursued without wisdom or restraint. In their endless wandering through Rapture's drowned halls, searching for little sisters who may never come, they serve as both guardians and prisoners of a dream that became nightmare, forever bound to protect what can never be saved. Their heavy footsteps marking time in a tomb where genius and madness sleep together beneath the crushing weight of the indifferent sea.